Introduction. The human brain. The human brain is the central organ of the social nervous system, and the central nervous system is made up of the spinal cord. The brain consists of the cerebrum, the cerebellum and the brainstem. It regulates most of the body's movements, stores, incorporates and coordinates the information it receives from the sense organs and makes decisions about the instructions it sends to the rest of the organism. The brain is located in the skull bones of the head and covered by them. The cerebrum is the core of the human brain. It is split into two hemispheres of the cerebrum. The cerebral cortex is an external layer of grey matter which covers the centre of white matter. The cortex is divided into the neocortex and the allocortex, which is much smaller. The neocortex consists of 6 neuronal layers, while the allocortex comprises 3 to 4 layers. Conventionally, each hemisphere is divided into 4 lobes: the frontal, temporal, parietal and occipital lobes. The frontal lobe is concerned with executive functions, including self-control, planning, reasoning and abstract thought, while vision is dedicated to the occipital lobe. Cortical areas within each lobe are correlated with different functions, such as regions of the sensory, motor and communication. Although the structure and function of the left and right hemispheres are mainly identical, certain features are related to one hand, such as language in the left and visual spatial capacity in the right. Commissural nerve tracts link the hemispheres, and the largest in the corpus callosum. The cerebrum is connected to the spinal cord via the brainstem. The brainstem is composed of the midbrain, the pons and the oblongata medulla. The cerebellum has pairs of tracts linking to the brainstem. The cerebrum is the ventricular system, which consists of 4 interconnected ventricles containing and circulating cerebrospinal fluid. There are many essential structures beneath the cerebral cortex, including the thalamus, the epithalamus, the pineal gland, the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, and the subthalamus, the limbic structures, including the amygdala and the hippocampus, the claustrum, the basal ganglia nuclei, the basal forebrain structures, and the 3 circumventricular organs. The brain cells contain neurons and protective glial cells. The brain comprises more than 86 billion neurons and a more or less equivalent number of other cells. Neuronal interconnections and their release of neurotransmitters in response to nerve impulses enable brain activity. Neurons attach to form neural pathways, neural circuits, and extensive networks. The neurotransmission mechanism powers the entire circuitry. The brain is covered by the skull, immersed in cerebrospinal fluid, and separated by the blood-brain barrier from the bloodstream. The brain, however, remains susceptible to injury, illness, and infection. Damage may result from trauma or a loss of blood flow known as a stroke. The brain is vulnerable to degenerative diseases, including Parkinson's disease, dementia like Alzheimer's disease, and multiple sclerosis. Psychiatric disorders are believed to be associated with brain dysfunctions, including autism and clinical depression. The brain can also be the site of both benign and malignant tumours. These often arise from other body locations. Neuroanatomy is the study of the anatomy of the brain, while neuroscience is the study of its function. A variety of methods are used in brain research. Much knowledge has historically been given by specimens from other species, which can be studied microscopically. Medical imaging technologies such as functional neuroimaging and recordings of electroencephalography, EGA, are essential in brain research. The medical history of brain injury sufferers has provided insight into the role of each part of the brain. Brain science, including psychological, experimental and theoretical stages, has evolved. The next step will be one of simulating brain function. For decades, in literature, the philosophy of mind has sought to answer the issue of the essence of consciousness and the dilemma of the mind-body. Phrenology pseudoscience sought to identify personality traits in 19th century cortical areas. Brain transplants are depicted in science fiction in tales such as Donovan's Brain of 1942. Early history. The earliest known reference to the brain is in the Edwin Smith Papyrus, an ancient Egyptian medical treatise written in the 17th century BCE. The brain hieroglyph appearing in this papyrus 8 times explains the symptoms, diagnosis and prediction of 2 traumatic head injuries. The papyrus discusses the brain's outer surface, damage symptoms, including seizures and aphasia, meninges and cerebrospinal fluid. Alcmaeon of Croton in Magna Graecia, in the 5th century BCE, first found the brain the seat of the mind. The unknown author of On the Holy Disease, a scientific treatise that is part of the Hippocratic corpus and traditionally credited to Hippocrates, also believed the brain to be the seat of wisdom in the 5th century BC at Athens. Aristotle initially considered the heart to be the seat of knowledge in his physiology and saw the brain as a tool for blood to cool down. He argued that humans are more rational than beasts because they have a larger brain to cool down their hot-bloodedness, among other factors. Aristotle identified the meninges and differentiated the cerebrum from the cerebellum. In the 4th and 3rd centuries BCE, Herophilus of Chalcedon separated the cerebrum and the cerebellum and gave the first clear description of the ventricles. With Erasistratus of Chios, he experimented on living brains. Their works are now mostly lost, and only due to secondary sources we are aware of their achievements. Following their deaths, some of their findings had to be rediscovered a millennium. During the time of the Roman Empire, anatomist Dr. Galen dissected the brains of goats, monkeys, horses, and pigs in the 2nd century AD. He argued that because the cerebellum was denser than the brain, it had to regulate the muscles, whereas it had to be where the senses were activated because the cerebrum was small. Galen also theorized that the brain had functioned through the ventricles through transferring animal spirits. Renaissance. In 1316, the modern study of brain anatomy began with Mondino de Luz's Anatomia. In 1536, Niccolo Massa found out the ventricles were filled with blood. The first to differentiate between the cerebrum and the cerebral cortex was Arcangelo Piccolomini of Rome. In 1543, Andreas Vesalius published De Humani Corporis Fabrica, a 7-volume work. The 7th book examined the brain and body, with detailed pictures of the ventricles, cranial nerves, pituitary gland, meninges, body structures, brain and spinal cord vascular supply, and a description of the peripheral nerves. Vesalius dismissed the widespread assumption that the ventricles were responsible for brain development, arguing that many animals may have a ventricular system similar to humans, but no real intelligence. René Descartes proposed dualism theory to address the question of the relationship between the brain and the mind. He indicated that the pineal gland was where the intention connected with the body, acting as the seat of the soul and as the link by which animal spirits moved through the brain from the blood. This dualism undoubtedly gave impetus to later anatomists to investigate further the relationship between the anatomical and functional aspects of brain anatomy. Within the field of neurology and brain science, Thomas Willis is considered a second pioneer. In 1664, he published Cerebri Anatomy, Latin brain anatomy, accompanied by cerebral pathology in 1667. Among these, he identified the structure of the cerebellum. The blood supply was studied by the ventricles, the cerebral hemispheres, the brainstem, and the cranial nerves, and suggested functions associated with various areas of the brain. Willis' circle was named after his inquiries into the blood supply of the brain, and he was the first to use the term neurology. While studying it, Willis separated the mind from the body. He dismissed the widely held belief that the cortex consisted only of blood vessels, and the idea of the last 2 centuries that the cortex was only incidentally critical. Throughout the mid-19th century, Émile Dubois, Raymond and Hermann von Helmholtz were able to use a galvanometer to show that electrical impulses were travelling through the nerves at observable speeds, refuting their teacher Johannes Peter Müller's belief that the nerve impulse was a critical function that could not be calculated. In 1875, Richard Caton illustrated electrical impulses in the rabbits' and monkeys' cerebral hemispheres. Jean-Pierre Flourens invented the experimental method of destroying different parts of animal brains, explaining the effects on movement and action in the 1820s. Odin period brain experiments became more advanced during the 1880s, with Camillo Golgi's use of the microscope and the invention of a silver staining process. It revealed the complex structures of single neurons. Santiago Ramon y Cajal used this and contributed to the creation of a theory of neurons, the then groundbreaking concept that the neuron is the functional unit of the brain. He used microscopy to expose several types of cells and proposed purposes for the cells he saw. For this, Golgi and Cajal are considered the pioneers of the neuroscience of the 20th century, both sharing the 1906 Nobel Prize for their studies and discoveries in this field. Charles Sherrington published his seminal 1906 work, The Integrative Operation of the Nervous System, which investigates the role of reflexes, the evolutionary nature of the nervous system, the functional differentiation of the brain, and the central nervous system structure and cellular activity. Founding the Journal of Neurophysiology, John Farquhar Fulton published the first systematic textbook on nervous system physiology during 1938. Neuroscience started to be accepted as a distinct, unified scientific discipline during the 20th century, with David Rioch, Francis O. Schmidt, and Stephen Kuffler playing critical roles in the field's establishment. Starting in the 1950s, Rioch started combining essential anatomical and physiological work with clinical psychiatry at the Walter Reed Army Research Institute. At the same time, Schmidt founded the Neuroscience Research Network, an inter-university and international organization that brings together the sciences of biology, medicine, psychology, and behavior. Through this course, the term neuroscience itself emerges. After research on brain-damaged patients, Paul Broca correlated brain regions with different functions, especially language in the Broca area. John Hewlings Jackson identified the role of the motor cortex by looking around the body for the development of epileptic seizures. Karl Wernicke identified a region linked to the comprehension and development of languages. Depending on the presence of the cells, Corbinian-Brodmann separated brain regions. By 1950, Sherrington, Pepys and MacLean had described many of the roles of the brainstem and limbic system. Neuroplasticity, introduced by Margaret Kennard, who experimented on monkeys during the 1930s, was due to the brain's capacity to reorganize and alter with age, and a recognized crucial growth period. Harvey Cushing, 1869-1939, has been known as the world's first professional brain surgeon. In 1937, by conducting the first surgical clipping of an intracranial aneurysm, Walter Dandy started the art of vascular neurosurgery. Comparative anatomy. The human brain contains many properties common to all vertebrate brains. Some of its characteristics are similar to all mammalian brains, most notably a cerebral cortex of 6 layers and a collection of associated structures like hippocampus and amygdala. In humans, the amygdala is proportionally more significant than in many other species. Human beings have more parts of the brain, sensory and motor connections, than smaller animals like rats and cats, being a primate brain. The human brain has a significantly wider cerebral cortex than other primates in comparison to body size, and a highly evolved visual system for a hominid brain. Also, in contrast to a traditional monkey's brain, the human brain is greatly expanded. A gradual increase in brain size has marked the progression of human evolution from Australopithecus 4 million years ago to Homo sapiens, modern humans. When the brain size increased, this improved the scale and shape of the skull, from about 600 chem3 in Homo habilis to about 1520 chem3 in Homo neanderthalensis on average. Variations in genetics, gene expression, and interactions between genes. Environment help clarify the differences in the role of the human brain and other primates. Gross anatomy. The average weight of the adult human brain is about 1.2, 1.4 kg, 2.6, 3.1 lb, which is around 2% of the total body weight, with a volume of around 1260 chem3 in men and 1130 chem3 in women. There is significant individual variability, with a typical reference range of 1180-1620 G, 260-357 lbpi for men and 1030-1400 G, 227, 327-309 lb. Neurological variations between the sexes have not been shown to correlate with it. Or other academic skill tests in any clear way, consisting of the cerebral hemispheres. The cerebrum comprises the central portion of the brain and overlaps the other brain structure. The outer hemispheric region, the cerebral cortex, is a grey matter composed of neuronal cortical layers. Every hemisphere is divided into 4 main lobes: the front lobe, the parietal lobe, the temporal lobe, and the occipital lobe. Some sources, which are the main lobe, a limbic lobe, and an insular lobe, contain 3 other lobes. The central lobe includes the precentral gyrus and the postcentral gyrus, as it forms a distinct functional position. At the beginning of the midbrain region, the brainstem, resembling a stalk, binds to and leaves the cerebrum. The brainstem comprises the midbrain, the pons, and the oblongata medulla. The cerebellum, Latin little brain, lies behind the brainstem. 3 membranes, or meninges, protect the cerebrum: brainstem, cerebellum, and spinal cord. The layers are the rough dura material, the middle arachnoid material, and the fragile inner pier material. The subarachnoid room and subarachnoid cisterns, which hold the cerebrospinal fluid, are between the arachnoid material and the pia mater. The cerebral cortex's outermost membrane is the pia mater's basement membrane, called glia limitans, which is an integral component of the blood-brain barrier. The living brain is very soft, with a similarly thick tofu-like consistency in a gel. The neural cortical layers make up much of the cerebral grey matter, while the white case is made up of the deeper subcortical regions of myelinated axons. The white brain matter accounts for around half the overall brain volume. Cerebrum. The cerebrum is the central portion of the brain, which is separated by a deep groove, the longitudinal fissure, into almost symmetrical left and right hemispheres. Asymmetry is noted as a patalia between the lobes. 5 commissures that cross the longitudinal fissure link the regions. The largest of these is the corpus callosum. Every part is conventionally divided into 4 main lobes. The front lobe, the parietal lobe, the temporal lobe, and the occipital lobe, named for the bones of the skulls that surround it. While there is some functional overlap between them, each lobe is associated with 1 or 2 different functions. The surface of the brain is divided into ridges, gyri, and grooves, sulci, many of which are called, usually according to their location, such as the frontal lobe gyrus or the central sulcus that divides the central hemispheric regions. The secondary and tertiary folds have several slight variations. The outer portion of the cerebrum is the cerebral cortex, which consists of grey matter organised in strata. It has a thickness of 2 to 4 millimetres, 0.79 to 0.157 in, and is deeply folded to give a curved look. The white-grey matter lies under the cortex. The neocortex is the most significant component of the cerebral cortex, which has 6 layers of neurons. The rest of the cortex is allocortex, with 3 or 4 layers. Divisions map the cortex into some 50 separate functional areas known as Brodmann's regions. Once viewed under a microscope, those areas are noticeably different. The cortex is divided into 2 significant functional areas, a motor cortex and cortex of the sensory. The primary motor cortex in the brainstem and spinal cord, which sends axons down to the motor neurons, occupies the rear portion of the frontal lobe immediately in front of the somatosensory region. The primary sensory areas in the thalamus transmit signals from the sensory nerves and tracts utilizing relay nuclei. Key sensory areas include the occipital lobe's visual cortex, the temporal lobe and insular cortex in portions of the auditory cortex, and the parietal lobe's somatosensory cortex. The remaining portions of the brain, called the regions of interaction, such areas receive feedback from the sensory areas and lower parts of the brain and are involved in the complex processes of perception, learning and decision-making, command of focus, critical thought, attitudes, problem-solving tasks, and physical responses and personality are the essential functions of the frontal lobe. The occipital lobe is the smallest. Visual perception, visual spatial processing, movement and colour recognition are its main functions. The lobe includes a lower occipital lobule, known as the cuneus. The temporal lobe controls audible and visual memory, vocabulary and some speech and hearing, horizontal bisection of the head cortical folds and white matter. The cerebrum comprises the ventricles, where the cerebrospinal fluid is formed and circulated. The septum pellucidum, a membrane that divides the lateral ventricles, is beneath the corpus callus. The thalamus is behind the lateral ventricles, and the hypothalamus is to the left and behind. The hypothalamus refers to the gland of the hypophysis. The brainstem sits at the back of the thalamus. The basal ganglia, also called basal nuclei, is a group of structures deep within the hemispheres involved in the regulation of action and motion. The striatum is the most significant component, while the globus pallidus, the substantia nigra, and the subthalamic nucleus are others. The internal capsule isolates sections of the dorsal striatum, putamen and globus pallidus from the lateral ventricles and thalamus. At the same time, the caudate nucleus spreads around and abuts the outer lateral ventricles. A thin neuronal layer called claustrum is situated at the deepest part of the lateral sulcus between the insular cortex and the striatum. Variety of basal forebrain structures are found under and in front of the striatum. These include the accumbens nucleus, the basilis nucleus, Broca's diagonal unit, substantia innominata, and the septal nucleus medial. These structures are essential for generating acetylcholine, the neurotransmitter, which is then widely distributed across the brain. The basal forebrain, especially the nucleus basalis, is considered to be the main cholinergic contribution to the striatum and neocortex of the central nervous system cerebellum. The cerebellum is divided into an anterior lobe, a rear lobe, and a lobe with floccular nodularity. The anterior and later portions are bound by the vermes in the centre. The cerebellum has a much thinner outer cortex, which is thinly furrowed into several angled transverse fissures compared with the cerebral cortex. The third lobe, the floccular nodular lobe, is perceived from under between the two lobes. The cerebellum sits under the occipital lobes at the back of the cranial cavity and is separated from these by the cerebellar tentorium, a layer of fibre. It is connected by the upper cerebellar peduncles to the brainstem midbrain, by the middle cerebellar peduncles to the pons, and by the lower cerebellar peduncles to the medulla. The cerebellum consists of an inner white matter medulla and a richly folded grey matter outer cortex. The anterior and posterior lobes of the cerebellum tend to play a role in organising and smoothing complex motor movements, and the floccular nodular lobe in maintaining equilibrium. However, there is controversy about their cognitive, behavioural and motor roles. Brainstem. The brainstem sits below the cerebrum and is made up of the midbrain, pons and medulla. It lies in the back of the skull, lying on the base part known as the clivus, and ends at the magnum foramen, a wide opening in the occipital bone. Under this, the brainstem continues as the spinal cord covered by the vertebral column. 10 of the 12 pairs of cranial nerve come out of the brainstem directly. The brainstem also includes several cranial nerve nuclei and peripheral nerve nuclei, as well as nuclei involved in controlling other critical processes, including breathing, eye motion regulation, and balance. Throughout and around the length of the brainstem, reticular formation, a network of nuclei of unknown shape, is present. Many nerve tracts pass through the brainstem and transmit information to and from the cerebral cortex to the rest of the body. Microanatomy, the human brain, is composed predominantly of neurons, glial cells, neural stem cells, and blood vessels. Neuron types include interneurons, pyramid cells, including Betz cells, motor neurons, upper and lower motor neurons, and Purkinje cells in the cerebella. The BET cells are the largest in the nervous system by cell body size. The estimated adult human brain comprises 86 8 billion neurons, with a nearly equivalent number of non-neuronal cells, 85 10 billion. For such neurons, 16 billion 19 are in the cerebral cortex, and 69 billion 80 are in the cerebellum. Glial cell types include astrocytes, including Bergmann glia, oligodendrocytes, ependymol, including tanycytes, radial glial cells, microglia, and a subtype of progenitor oligodendrocyte cells. Astrocytes are the glial cells, which are the largest. These are stellate cells with multiple radiating processes from their cell bodies. Many of such methods end up on capillary walls as perivascular end feet. The cortex's glia limitans are made up of operations in the astrocyte foot that partly serve to hold the brain cells. Our cells are white blood cells that interact in the brain's neuroimmune system. 6E mast cells in the central nervous system are present in several structures, including meninges. They mediate neuroimmune responses in inflammatory conditions and help to maintain the blood barrier, especially in brain regions where the barrier is absent. Mast cells in the body and central nervous system have the same general roles, such as affecting or controlling allergic reactions, innate and adaptive immunity, autoimmunity, and inflammation. Mast cells function as the central cell of the effector through which pathogens can affect the biochemical signaling between the gastrointestinal tract and the central nervous system. About 400 genes are known to be unique to the brain. ELAV3 is expressed in all neurons, and NR, GN, and REAP2 are shown both in pyramidal neurons. GADON, essential for the neurotransmitter GABA's biosynthesis, is expressed in interneurons. Astrocyte markers GFAP and SON100 are proteins found in glial cells. Myelin essential protein is found in oligodendrocytes and the transcription factor. OLI2, cerebrospinal fluid. Cerebrospinal fluid is a transparent, colourless transcellular fluid that circulates in the subarachnoid space around the brain, in the ventricular system, and the central spinal cord canal. This also fills up several holes in the room known as subarachnoid cisterns. The 4 ventricles, 2 lateral, 1/3, and a 4th ventricle, all contain choroid plexus, which produces cerebrospinal fluid. The 3rd ventricle is in the midline, and the lateral ventricles are related. The 3rd ventricle is connected to the 4th ventricle by one single duct, the cerebral aqueduct between the pons and the cerebellum. 3 separate openings drain the cerebrospinal fluid from the 4th ventricle into the cisterna magna. One of the central cisterns, the centre, and 2 lateral apertures. From here in the subarachnoid area, cerebrospinal fluid circulates between the arachnoid material and pia mater around the brain and spinal cord. There is approximately 150 ml of cerebrospinal liquid at any moment, most inside the area of the subarachnoid. It is regenerated and consumed continuously and is replaced roughly once every 5-6 hours. Lymphatic system has been identified as the brain's lymphatic drainage system. The brain-wide lymphatic method involves drainage routes that flow through the cerebral blood vessels from the cerebrospinal fluid and the meningeal lymphatic vessels connected with the dural sinuses. The pathway filters interstitial fluid out of the brain tissue. Blood supply. The internal carotid arteries provide the front of the brain with oxygenated blood, and the vertebral arteries supply the back of the brain with blood. Such two circulations join together in the Willis circle, a chain of linked arteries that lies between the midbrain and the pons in the interpeduncular cister. The carotid arteries inside are branches of rising carotid arteries. They cross the carotid canal into the skull, pass through the cavernous sinus, and into the subarachnoid space. They then join Willis circle, with two branches making up the anterior cerebral arteries. Such branches migrate along the longitudinal fissure forward and upward and supply the front and midline portions of the brain. One or more small anterior arteries that interact with each other join the two anterior cerebral arteries shortly after they form branches. As the middle cerebral arteries, the internal carotid arteries proceed forward. They move horizontally along the eye socket sphenoid bone, then up through the cortex of the insula, where finishing branches emerge. The middle cerebral arteries are sending branches along its length. The vertebral arteries emerge as branches of the subclavian arteries of the left and right. We fly upwards through transverse foramina, which are cervical vertebrae spaces. Each hand reaches the cranial cavity along with the corresponding hand of the medulla through the foramen magnum. They sell off one of the three divisions of the cerebella. The vertebral arteries converge in front of the middle part of the medulla to form the more large basilar artery that sends multiple branches to supply the medulla and pons, and the other two anterior and superior branches of the cerebella. The basilar artery ultimately splits into two posterior arteries of the cerebrum, which move outward along the superior peduncles of the cerebella, and along the top of the tentorium of the cerebella, where they send branches to supply the temporal and occipital lobes. Every posterior cerebral artery carries a small posterior artery to join the carotid arteries inside. Blood drainage. Cerebral veins pump deoxidized blood out of the brain. The brain has two major vein networks, an outer or superficial network, 3 branched on the surface of the cerebrum, and an inner system. Such two systems communicate through joining veins to anastomosing. The brain veins flow into more extensive cavities of the dural venous sinuses, which are typically situated between the dura mater and the skull cover. Blood flows into the great cerebral vein from the cerebellum and midbrain. Blood from the medulla and brainstem pons have intricate drainage patterns, either in the spinal veins or in adjacent cerebral veins. The blood in the deep part of the brain flows into a venous plexus in the front of the cavernous sinus and the sides of the upper and lower petrosal sinuses, and the more inferior sagittal sinus in the back. Blood flows from the outer brain into the broad upper sagittal sinus, which lies on top of the brain in the midline. At the confluence of the sinuses, blood from here combines with blood from the straight sinus. Blood from here flows into the transverse sinuses between the left and right, which then drain into the sigmoid sinuses, which collect blood from the cavernous sinus and the petrosal sinuses above and below. The sigmoid drains into the deep jugular veins inside. The blood-brain barrier. The more prominent arteries supply blood to smaller capillaries in the brain. Such smallest blood vessels in the brain are filled with cells that are connected by close junctions, and fluids do not rush in or spill out to the same degree as they do in other capillaries, forming the blood-brain barrier. Pericytes play a significant role in shaping tight junctions. The barrier is less permeable to larger molecules, but is nevertheless permeable to water, carbon dioxide, oxygen, and most fat-soluble substances, including alcohol and anesthetics. The blood-brain barrier is not present in circumventricular organs, such as the pineal gland, the postema field, and certain areas of the hypothalamus, which are structures in the brain that may need to respond to changes in body fluids. There is a common blood cerebrospinal fluid barrier, which serves the same function as the blood-brain barrier, but enables the transfer of various substances into the brain because of the distinct structural features of the two barrier systems. Development. The embryonic ectoderm develops a thickened strip called the neural plate at the beginning of the 3rd week of development, verse 60, 8 by the 4th week of development. The neural plate is extended to provide a deep cephalic end, a less sizable middle section, and a narrow caudal end. Such swellings are known as the primary brain vesicles and represent forebrain, midbrain and hindbrain beginnings. Neural crest cells, derived from the ectoderm, occupy neural folds at the lateral edges of the plate. By the 4th week, during the neurulation stage, neural folds are close to forming the neural tunnel, bringing neural crest cells together at the neural crest. The neural crest extends around the length of the tube at the cephalic end with cranial neural crest cells and caudal neural crest cells at the tip. Cells detach themselves from the crest and move within the tube in a craniocaudal, head-to-tail, wave. Cells at the cerebrospinal end give rise to the brain, and cells at the caudal end give rise to the cord. When it develops, the tube flexes to form the crescent-shaped cerebral hemispheres at heart. The first appearance of cerebral hemispheres is on day 32. The cephalic part bends firmly forward in a cephalic flexure early in the 4th week. This flex part becomes the forebrain, prosencephalon. The adjacent curving part becomes the midbrain, mesencephalon, and the hindbrain, rhombencephalon, becomes caudal to the flexure. Those areas are developed as the 3 primary brain vesicles known as swellings. 5 secondary brain vesicles have developed within the 5th week of development. The forebrain splits into 2 vesicles, an anterior telencephalon and a diencephalon posterior. The telencephalon allows the cerebral cortex, basal ganglia, and associated structures to form. The diencephalon causes thalamus and hypothalamus to develop. Also, the hindbrain divides into 2 sections, the metencephalons and the myelencephalon. The metencephalon gives rise to the pons and the cerebellum. The myelencephalon produces the oblongata medulla. The brain also breaks into repeated segments, called neuromeras, during the 5th week. Those are classified as rhombomeras in the hindbrain. The cortical folding known as gyrification is a feature of the brain. The cortex is smooth for slightly over 5 months of fetal development. The wrinkled morphology showing the fissures which begin to mark out the lobes of the brain is evident by the gestational age of 24 weeks. Why the wrinkles and folds of the cortex are not well known, but gyrification has been related to intelligence and neurological disorders, and many theories of gyrification have been suggested. These theories include mechanical buckling, axonal stress, and tangential differential expansion. What is clear is that gyrification is not a random process, but rather a complex, predetermined process of creation that produces patterns of folds consistent between individuals and most organisms. The lateral cerebral fossa is the first groove to turn up in the 4th month. To fit into the restricted area, the expanding caudal end of the hemisphere will curve over in a forward direction, This covers the fossa and gives it a much deeper ridge known as the lateral sulcus, which marks the temporal lobe out. Individual sulci have formed by the 6th month that demarcates the lobe's frontal, parietal and occipital. A human genome-present gene archiplevimbem may play a significant role in girification and encephalization. Function. Engine motor control the front lobe, assists in thought, motor regulation, emotion and expression. It includes the motor cortex involved in movement planning and coordination. The prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for cognitive processing at a higher level, and the region of Broca, which is essential for language development. The brain's motor system is responsible for generating and regulating motion. The produced movements pass through the nerves from the brain to the body's motor neurons, which regulate the muscle action. The corticospinal tract brings motion from the brain to the abdomen and limbs through the spinal cord. The cranial nerves bear head, mouth and face-related gestures. Gross movement, such as locomotion and arms and leg movements, is produced in the motor cortex, divided into 3 parts. The primary motor cortex, located in the prefrontal gyrus, which has sections dedicated to the movement of various body parts. 2 other areas assist and control these gestures, which lie anterior to the primary motor cortex, the premotor region and the supplementary motor region. The hands and mouth have a much greater area devoted to them than other areas of the body, allowing for smoother movement. This was visualized in a homunculus motor. Impulses produced from the motor cortex move along the corticospinal tract along the medulla front and cross, decussat, at the pyramids of the medullae. They then pass down the spinal cord, most of which are connected to interneurons, in effect binding to lower motor neurons within the grey matter, which then transmits the impulse to move to the muscles. The cerebellum and basal ganglia, in beautiful, complex and synchronized muscle movements, play a part. Connections between the cortex and the basal ganglia regulate muscle tone, initiation of posture and motion, and are called the extrapyramidal network. Sensory. The sensory nervous system participates in acquiring and storing sensory information. This information is transmitted from the cranial nerves via tracts in the spinal cord and directly at blood-exposed brain centers. The brain also collects knowledge and interprets it from the distinctive senses of vision, smell, hearing and taste, includes mixed motor and sensory signals. The brain receives information from the skin about excellent touch, friction, pain, vibration and temperature. The brain receives knowledge about specific locations from the joints. The sensory cortex is located only above the motor cortex and, like the motor cortex, has sensation-related regions from different parts of the body. Sensation collected on the skin by a sensory receptor is converted into a nerve signal, which is transmitted through tracts in the spinal cord to a collection of neurons. The pathway of the dorsal column, medial lemniscus, provides details on the delicate touch, vibration and location of joints. The fibers of the pathway migrate up the back part of the spinal cord to the back part of the medulla, where they connect with neurons of second order that carry fibers across the midline immediately. So these fibers migrate up into the thalamus ventrobasal complex, where they interact with third-order neurons that carry fibers to the sensory cortex. The spinothalamic tract carries pain, temperature and gross touch information. The pathway fibers migrate up the spinal cord and attach for pain and temperature with second-order neurons in the reticular formation of the brainstem. and also terminate for gross contact at the thalamus ventrobasal complex. Vision is produced by light, which hits the eye's retina. Photoreceptors in the retina transduce the light sensory input into an electrical nerve signal that is sent to the occipital lobe's visual cortex. Visual impulses pass from the optic nerves of the retinas. Optic nerve fibers from the nasal halves of the retinas cross through the opposite sides, joining the fibers from the temporal halves of the opposite retinas to form the optic tracts. The configurations of the anatomy of the eyes and the visual pathways mean that the right half of each retina receives a vision from the left visual area, is mediated by the right visual cortex, and vice versa. At the lateral geniculate nucleus, the optic tract fibers enter the brain and pass through the optic radiation to enter the visual cortex. Within the inner ear, both hearing and balance are produced. Sound results in ossical movements that eventually travel to the hearing organ, and changes in equilibrium result in fluid movement within the inner ear. This generates a nerve signal which goes through the nerve of the vestibular cochlea. This travels from here to the cochlear nuclei, to the superior olive nucleus, to the medial geniculate nucleus, and eventually to the auditory radiation to the sensory cortex. The sensation of smell is produced in the nasal cavity by receptor cells in the olfactory mucosa epithelium. This information passes through a relatively porous part of the olfactory nerve, which goes into the skull. This nerve transmits information from where it is transmitted to the olfactory cortex to the neural circuitry of the olfactory bulb. Taste is produced from receptors on the tongue and transferred into the solitary nucleus in the brainstem along the facial and glossopharyngeal nerves. Other taste information is also transmitted through the vagus nerve from the pharynx into this region. Information is then passed into the gustatory cortex through the thalamus from here. Regulation. The brain's autonomic functions include regulation or rhythmic control of heart rate and breathing rate, and maintenance of homeostasis. The vasomotor core of the medulla regulates blood pressure and heart rate, which causes arteries and veins to be somewhat constricted at rest. This does so by affecting via the vagus nerve the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems. Blood pressure information is produced by baroreceptors in the aortic arches, aortic bodies, and transmitted to the brain through the afferent vagus nerve fibers. Knowledge about the changes in pressure in the carotid sinus comes from carotid bodies situated near the carotid artery, and this is transmitted through a nerve that joins the glossopharyngeal nerve. This knowledge travels in the medulla down to the solitary nucleus. Signals from here reach the middle of the vasomotor to change the constriction of the vein and artery accordingly. The brain regulates the rate of respiration, primarily by medulla and pons respiratory centers. By producing motor impulses that are transmitted down the spinal cord, through the phrenic nerve to the diaphragm and other breathing muscles, the respiratory centers regulate respiration. This is a mixed nerve that carries back to the centers sensory information. There are 4 respiratory centers, 3 with a more well-specified structure, and 1 with a less well-functional apnea center. A dorsal respiratory community in the medulla triggers the need to breathe in and receive sensory input from the body directly. The ventral respiratory category 2 influences breathing out during exertion in the medulla. The pneumatic center controls each breath's duration in the pons, and the apneustic center tends to influence the inhalation method. Blood carbon dioxide and pitch are detected explicitly by the respiratory centers. Data on blood, oxygen, carbon dioxide, and pH levels are also detected on the walls of the arteries in the aortic and carotid peripheral chemoreceptors. This knowledge is transmitted into the respiratory centers through the vagus and glossopharyngeal nerves. The respiratory centers are activated by high carbon dioxide, an acidic Phe, or low oxygen. Pulmonary stretch receptors in the lungs also influence the ability to breathe in, which prevents the lungs from overinflating when triggered by transmitting information through the vagus nerve to the respiratory centers. The diencephalon hypothalamus is involved in controlling many of the body's functions. Functions include neuroendocrine regulation, circadian rhythm regulation, autonomic nervous system control, and fluid regulation, and dietary intake. Throughout the hypothalamus, the circadian rhythm is regulated by two different cell classes. The anterior hypothalamus includes the suprachiasmatic nucleus and the ventrolateral preoptic nucleus, which generates an approximately 24-hour circadian clock through gene expression cycles. In the circadian day, the sleeping pattern is regulated by an ultradian rhythm. Sleep is a necessary condition for the body and brain, which allows the body's processes to be closed down, which rested. Findings also show that the usual buildup of toxins inside the brain is eliminated during sleep. The brain absorbs a quarter of the overall energy needs of the body when alive. Sleep naturally decreases the usage and gives room for energy, giving a TP restoration. Sleep deprivation results are representative of the total need for sleep. The lateral hypothalamus contains orexinergic neurons that control appetite and arousal to the ascending reticular activating system through their projections. The hypothalamus regulates the pituitary gland through the release into the median eminence of peptides, including oxytocin and vasopressin, as well as dopamine. The hypothalamus is involved in controlling functions such as blood pressure, heart rate, respiration, sweating, and other homeostatic processes via the autonomic projections. The hypothalamus also plays a part in thermal control and is capable of causing a fever when activated by the immune system. The hypothalamus is affected by the kidneys. The renin produced by the kidneys causes an urge to drink when blood pressure decreases. The hypothalamus also controls the intake of food through autonomic signals, and the digestive system releases a hormone. While language functions have historically been thought to be limited to the field of Wernicke and Broca, and it is now generally recognized that a broader network of cortical regions contributes to language functions. The research on how the brain understands, expresses, and acquires language is called neurolinguistics, which is a broad multidisciplinary field that draws from cognitive neuroscience, cognitive linguistics, and psycholinguistics. Lateralization: the cerebrum has a contralateral structure, with each brain hemisphere predominantly communicating with one half of the body. In essence, the left side of the brain interacts with the body's right side, and vice versa. The root reason for this is unclear. The motor connections between the brain and the spinal cord and the sensory relations between the spinal cord and the ear all cross sides of the ear. Visual feedback follows a more complicated rule at a point called the optic chiasm. The optic nerves from the two eyes come together, and half the fibres from each nerve separate to join the other. The effect is that connections from the left half of the retina in both eyes go to the brain's left side, while connections from the right half of the retina go to the brain's right side. Since half of the retina absorbs light from the opposite half of the visual field. Brain training, brain conditioning, also known as cognitive fitness, is a physical exercise program intended to retain or improve one's cognitive abilities. Typically, the term cognitive capacity applies to fluid intelligence components such as executive control and working memory. Cognitive training represents a theory that cognitive skills can be preserved or enhanced by brain exercise. Similar to how the body exercises to improve physical fitness, cognitive training exercises may take place in several ways, including physical fitness training, playing online games, or conducting cognitive tasks in conjunction with the training scheme, playing video games that involve visuospatial thinking, and participating in creative activities such as dance, sculpture, and music. Numerous studies have shown that facets of brain development tend to be plastic. During life, brain plasticity is a result of the brain's ability to adapt and evolve in response to the environment. Cognitive training studies also use approaches based on neuroanatomy, such as functional magnetic resonance imaging, (fMRI), to research how training affects the structure and function of brains. There is considerable concern within the scientific community about the feasibility of brain training systems and debate about the ethics of promoting brain training technologies for potentially vulnerable subjects. Overview. The scientists have been researching cognitive preparation for the past 100 years. The first recorded study of cognitive training was conducted in the Journal of Educational Psychology and attempted to educate students with tests on letter memorization cognitively. The researchers found the ability to complete the letter memorization task marginally increased, but no global changes that could be applied to other tasks. Tasks similar to the letter memorization exercise are still being used today, but such tasks are usually referred to as working memory tasks, targeting the memory subset needed to retain and manipulate information in the short term. Cognitive preparation requires programs that aim to improve cognitive abilities such as problem solving, reasoning, concentration, executive functioning, and working memory. Such kinds of abilities are targeted as they are associated with individual differences, such as academic performance and life outcomes, and it is assumed that the training of general cognitive skills can contribute to the transition of change in several domains. Cognitive preparation requires programs that aim to improve cognitive skills. One theory to support cognitive training is that certain regularly performed activities can help preserve or boost the cognitive reserve. Cognitive training programs typically target demographic groups such as individuals with neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and children with ADHD who experience general cognitive deficits. More generally, cognitive preparation is thought to help older adults in particular because there is a general decrease in fluid intelligence with age, and there are decreases in processing ability, working memory, long-term memory, and thinking skills. Many researchers suggest that the lower performance of older adults on cognitive tasks may not necessarily reflect actual skill, as older adults may display declines in performance due to choice of technique, such as avoiding memory recall in memory tasks. Evidence for neuroplasticity. The belief that the brain is fluid is rooted in cognitive preparation. Brain plasticity refers to the brain's capacity to adapt and to evolve based on life experiences. Neuroplasticity evidence includes research on musical ability and London taxi drivers, which have shown that skill contributes to increased volume in different brain areas. A 2008 research that taught older adults to juggle found an improvement in the amount of grey matter as a result of the exercise. A study attempting to train the updating aspect of executive function in young and older adults found that cognitive training could lead to changes in task performance in both groups, but only in young adults and not older adults was a general transfer of skill to new tasks shown. It has been hypothesized that during the trained and transition tasks, the transition effects are contingent on a difference in neural activation. Cognitive preparation has been shown to contribute to structural improvements in attention preparation, such as increased blood flow to the prefrontal cortex and reduced bilateral compensatory recruitment in older adults. Research suggests that cardiovascular exercise can be one of the most successful types of cognitive training. Studies have shown that reduced cardiovascular fitness is associated with brain atrophy, and that training older adults in a cardiovascular fitness regimen results in increased volume in the prefrontal and temporal cortex areas and improved memory capacity. Commercial programs. Since 2016, businesses providing cognitive training products and services have been marketing them as enhancing educational performance for children and for adults as enhancing memory, processing speed and problem solving, and even as preventing dementia or Alzheimer's disease. They have also supported their marketing by discussing their founders' educational or professional history, some talking about neuroscience that supports their approach, especially neuroplasticity concepts and learning transfer, and some citing evidence from clinical trials. The main point these firms make is that the specialized training they provide generalizes to other fields, academic or technical success in general or everyday life. Cognifit was founded in 1999, Cogmed in 2001, Posit Science in 2002, and Brain Age was first published in 2005, both capitalizing on the increasing public interest in neuroscience, along with increased parents' concerns about ADHD and other learning disorders in their children, and their cognitive health issues as they age. The introduction of Brain Age in 2005 marked a shift in the industry as it was sold to relatively limited groups, e.g., students with learning problems, before such goods or services, but Brain Age was sold to those with a large marketing budget. Consumers in the US spent $2 million on cognitive training products in 2005 and about $80 million in 2007. By 2012, computer preparation was an industry worth $1 billion 16 in 2013. The market was $1.03 billion, and software apps accounted for around 55% of those revenues. Neuroscientists and others at the time were increasingly worried about the general trend towards what they termed verification, neurohype, neuromania, and neuromyths, regulation and lawsuits. Beginning in January 2015, the United States Federal Trade Commission, FTC, sued companies offering brain training services or other items advertised as enhancing cognitive performance, including WordSmart Corporation, the company producing Lumosity, and Brain Science Laboratories offering dietary supplements, for false advertising. Later that year, the FTC sued LearningRx as well. The FTC found that the marketing of Lumosity preyed on the concerns of customers over age-related cognitive impairment, claiming that their games could stave off memory loss, dementia, and even Alzheimer's disease, without offering any empirical evidence to support their claims. The company was ordered not to make any claims that its products can improve performance at school, at work, or in athletics, or delay or protect against age-related deterioration in memory or other cognitive function, including mild cognitive impairment, dementia, or Alzheimer's disease, or reduced cognitive impairment caused by health conditions, including Turner syndrome, post-traumatic stress disorder. In its case against LearningRx, the FTC claimed that LearningRx was deceptively implying that their services had been scientifically shown to significantly enhance serious health problems such as ADHD, HDHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, autism, depression, Alzheimer's disease, strokes, and commotion. In 2016, Learning Grec settled with the FTC by promising not to make the contested claims unless they provided qualified and credible scientific evidence. That was described by qualified scientists as randomized controlled trials. Learning Grec agreed to pay $200,000 of a $4 million settlement for the monetary portion of the judgment. Effectiveness. In the scientific community, there's enough debate as to whether cognitive training is successful. A research conducted in 2011 with more than 11,000 participants found that participants progressed on the tasks they were trained in, but there was no transition to tasks beyond the school. This is growing to find in the literature of cognitive training and in general in the literature of cognitive psychology. Studies that aim to learn specific thinking skills often only display task. Specific progress and participants are unable to generalize their approaches to new tasks or problems. There was some evidence in 2016 that some of these programs enhanced performance on tasks on which participants were trained. There's evidence that performance improvements generalized to similar tasks, and almost no evidence that brain training generalized to cognitive performance on daily life. Moreover, most clinical trials were flawed. But in 2017, the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine found moderate intensity support for cognitive training as an intervention to reduce cognitive deterioration and dementia, and in 2018, cognitive training was included in the American Academy of Neurology recommendations for treating mild cognitive impairment. A group of scientists published a letter in 2008 advising the general public that there is a lack of studies showing the efficacy of brain games in older adults to address increasing public concerns about aggressive online marketing of brain games to the older population. In 2010, the Department for Healthcare Research and Quality found insufficient evidence to support any approach to avoid age-related memory or Alzheimer's deficits. Another group of scientists released a similar alert in 2014. Later that year, a counter-statement was made by another group of scientists, coordinated and supported by POSIT's chief scientific officer. They assembled a list of recent research on the cognitive training efficacy across populations and disciplines. In 2017, a National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine Committee issued a study on the evidence for strategies to reduce cognitive deterioration and dementia. In 2017, a group of Australian scientists conducted a systematic analysis of what studies of commercially available brain training programs have been published to provide accurate information to customers and doctors regarding which brain training programs are currently scientifically proven to function. Unfortunately, after evaluating approximately 8,000 studies of brain training programs that were marketed to study-aged older adults, most programs had no peer-reviewed validated proof of their efficacy, and of the 7 brain training programs that they did, only 2 of them had multiple trials, including at least one high-quality study, BrainHack and Cognifit. A group of researchers demonstrated in 2019 that reports of enhancement after brain stimulation and other educational programs were exaggerated based on a variety of meta-analyses. Other factors appear to play a more significant role, e.g. genetics. Sharpening the focus of the brain, you need to practice daily bursts of deep, uninterrupted focus to do your best brain work. As businessmen, we are always pulled in a million directions and don't always know which of our many essential tasks should be done first. In-depth research not only sharpens the concentrating capacity, but also helps achieve better results in less time, Newport said. Training also improves the capacity to tap back into the strategic thinking required to solve challenges and to prepare for the long term. In-depth research sounds impressive, and it is, but it takes time and patience. It's an ongoing process. So expect some failures to happen while you find your course. The trick is to add to your work-life routines and practices which are designed to sustain an entire concentration state. Here's how it goes. 1. Place a time. Start with a little time, like 10 to 20 minutes. You can believe like you should do more, but you can be tired and frustrated in trying to sustain too long and intense focus. If you feel like you can go on for more than 20 minutes, extend the duration to 30 minutes and then further. Another choice is to divide your deep work into 2 blocks of time, such as morning and evening. I think it's essential to use my calendar to block this time, just as I would do with a customer. Withdrawal. Deep work needs a sanctuary from disturbances outside. Open your office door or go off-site. And block internet access. Particularly enjoy my iPhone's Do Not Disturb function, which stops the alert so I can concentrate. Prepare your attitude. Devote time to relaxing your mind and planning for the deep work before you begin. I'll set my phone with a 2-minute timer and do a short meditation where I count my breaths and let go of the intrusive thoughts. I use meditation software also for more formal guided meditations. They not only clear my mind, but help me transfer my focus from a tense state to a relaxed one. Concentrate on a single mission. Try not to approach too many at once. Use your deep work time to concentrate on a particular goal, such as writing a paper, writing analysis, or simply brainstorming ideas. You end up spreading your time too thin when you try to do too much on the spot. I keep a list of ongoing tasks that I need to complete and circle the top priority ones. Switch your brain off. Shut down your brain. No post-dinner email searches and no mulling about an ongoing project. Creating this wall between your company and your personal life teaches your brain to distinguish working hours from downtimes. This way, your mind will know that it is time to concentrate on your next intense work session. Yoga and my guitar practice allow me to let go of the day of work and also to know that it's okay if I didn't get everything I wanted to be done. Investing in times of complete mental concentration is more daunting nowadays, but deep work can be a way to fully harness the capacity of your brain and make use of it for the most critical tasks at hand each day. It takes time and effort, like studying and developing any other skills, but deep work will help you tap into the immense power of attention, intensity, and commitment that everyone has, achieving the cognitive performance of the brain. What is high cognitive performance or peak brain performance? More and more people want their academic or professional performance enhanced by improving their cognitive abilities. This means improving cognitive functioning until that is optimal for every person. Would you know what is cognitive efficiency? Oh, and how to practice it. The post will provide more knowledge about high cognitive efficiency, as well as the most common strategies used to achieve it. What is high cognitive performance or peak brain performance? The high cognitive performance or max brain performance refers to the achievement of optimal and efficient cognitive capacities and executive functions. Work focuses on the capabilities retained from any alterations to achieve optimum performance for each person. Those who want to improve and further refine the findings obtained at the cognitive level boost memory, processing speed and decision-making. For example, similar skills are improved to optimal standards, ideally suited to existing labour market high demands. It is well known that in some athletic settings, such as top-class athletics, athlete preparation goes beyond only enhancing physical fitness, and this is where cognitive ability emerges as a significant factor for success. But how does an athlete train that aspect? There are many ways to exercise intellectual skills from an aspect of cognitive psychology, and cognitive stimulation has recently been in the spotlight. What is cognitive stimulation? Cognitive stimulation can be understood as a set of techniques and strategies focused on the effectiveness and enhancement of cognitive abilities through activities that bring about brain changes. High-quality, specific cognitive stimulation tailored to each person can improve capability performance such as working memory, attention, concentration, etc. Hence, it is essential to seek help from professionals to increase the chances of any cognitive intervention being successful. High cognitive performance achievement must necessarily involve unique, complementary tasks and exercises in addition to cognitive stimulation. These supplement stimulation to enhance physical and cognitive well-being and thus help maintain good health along with a healthy, balanced diet, regular physical exercise practice, and proper rest. All these aspects will favor the development and strengthening of cognitive functions in combination with proper cognitive stimulation. What is brain plasticity? Brain plasticity or neuroplasticity refers to the nervous system's capacity to adapt to the demands of the environment. Since being thoroughly developed, the nervous system can rebuild its structure and functionality, reorganize and restructure thanks to new synaptic connections. The increase in the number and convergence of these connections increases the efficiency of general brains. Neurons can also achieve quicker and more efficient information transmission, resulting in improved cognitive efficiency thanks to better communication. While all brains may initially seem similar because they share a typical underlying structure, no two brains are the same. A person's personal experiences and how we handle the underlying demands affect brain plasticity, helping us to adapt to commonly encountered circumstances and changes. Processes of learning and cognitive learning are closely linked to neuroplasticity, which defines personal identity. What populations can benefit from training to achieve high cognitive performance? Increasingly, people are involved in mental health care, and their practices require cognitive training. Usually, the goal is to improve quality of life by achieving adequate cognitive well-being, either preventing age-related cognitive decline or recovering from a cognitive deterioration pathology. Some competitive people want to achieve results in high job or college. The population that can benefit from training to achieve high cognitive performance, peak performance, is substantial, from students pursuing high academic performance to, among others, top-level athletes, executives or army forces. Students, some of the people who rely on intellectual abilities to obtain the desired outcomes, include senior students, last years of high school, who wish to attain high grades and guarantee admission to a specific university, graduate students who wish to retain excellent academic standards or qualify for a scholarship, or professionals who wish to secure a role of a civil servant. More and more young adults are becoming conscious at the time of entrance into the labour market of the value of proper planning and once working, sustaining excellent standards of performance to achieve good results. The inspiration of these young professionals is to look for any possible ways to enhance their cognitive performance. Executives are submitted to high, demanding work requirements and have to handle the management of multiple tasks simultaneously. Also, they are continually exposed to multiple stimuli that compete for their attention and have the ability to control their resources to obtain appropriate answers. Recently, many companies and organizations have included cognitive training tools among their activities, intending to boost employees' mental abilities, as well as promoting the benefits of physical exercise. Niveaus of motivation and happiness are improved, producing a very safe working atmosphere and increasing outcomes of productivity. Top-level athletes and professions demand that critical decisions be taken in just a few seconds, that attention is maintained over long periods, or that they respond instantly. Precise acts that involve high risks, along with strict deadlines to be met, may also be expected when reducing high stress levels. Proper mental training is essential for maintaining high levels of cognitive skills and executive functions. Improving focus, concentration, speed of thinking, rapid decision-making, logical reasoning, etc., are essential aspects of these occupations. High-performance sports have a long history of working together to train physical, mental, and emotional aspects which help to achieve excellent results in sports. Some of the factors involved include physical exercise, a healthy diet, appropriate rest periods, and mental and emotional preparation. Training in cognitive function works on attention and concentration, focus, and speed of operation. For example, those capabilities can influence shorter reaction times or more accurate throws. Also, it may help control the stress or strain that athletes are subjected to during specific periods of competition. Security forces, e.g., police officers, firemen, soldiers, etc. Some professions demand that crucial decisions be taken in just a few seconds, that attention is maintained for lengthy periods, or that they respond instantly. Precise acts that involve high risks along with strict deadlines to be met, may also be expected when reducing high stress levels. Proper mental training is essential for maintaining high levels of cognitive skills and executive functions. Improving focus, concentration, speed of thinking, rapid decision, logical reasoning, etc., are essential aspects of these occupations. Other identities, e.g., judges, prosecutors, journalists, etc. Sorting the information gathered from multiple sources is always a daunting activity, and we may miss valuable details that may have changed. Or it may be that we have a great deal of knowledge to evaluate and coordinate for decision-making. Occasionally, experts are frustrated by the amount of knowledge they need to take into account, and this knowledge is often conflicting. Better mental abilities, therefore, help manage these demands and finish the job. What can cognitive skills be trained? High cognitive efficiency can be accomplished by training a wide range of capabilities or by reinforcing particular skills which are more critical depending on our needs. Some of these cognitive functions are attention, capacity to produce, pick, direct, and sustain an appropriate degree of activation for the processing of relevant information, reasoning, capacity to solve problems, draw conclusions, and learn from events objectively in such a way that we can create causal and logical relations. Speed of processing, the ability that defines the relationship between cognitive execution and the time invested, enables fast and automated processing of information perception, codes and coordinates, different basic sensations to give sense to them. What can cognitive training exercises be employed? Let's look at some of the most commonly used cognitive stimulation behaviors and exercises to achieve high cognitive efficiency, peak brain output. Next, there are workbooks with cognitive enhancement exercises which are very useful for working on executive functions and cognitive abilities such as memory, concentration, focus, reasoning, problem solving, etc. Some of these workbooks can be downloaded from the internet free of charge, such as Estee's Cognitive Stimulation Exercise Workbooks and the Consorsi Sanitary Integral CSI Cognitive Stimulation and Memory Strengthening Exercise Workbooks. Other workbooks, such as Rubio's Cognitive Stimulation Workbooks, can be bought at bookstores or from the internet. Another cognitive activity for stimulation includes well-known games of brain training, available for smartphones. Computers and laptops, these apps offer the benefit of being used anywhere. Some of these games are Lumosity, Elevate Brain Exercise, Neuronation, Fit Brains Teacher, and Max. Although these are commonly used as brain conditioning techniques, there is contentious debate about moving learning to cognitively similar tasks and behaviors of everyday life. Neurotechnology is another method in cognitive training that often makes use of exercises to strengthen the cognitive function. A scientifically proven example is the unravel system created by Spanish neurotechnology firm BitBrain. Its system is suitable for medical settings, health and older adult settings, and high-performance settings. The unravel system uses modern neurofeedback techniques that monitor and evaluate each person's brain signals to individualize and customize the training. In this technique, cognitive performance-related neuroplastic improvements are made in the brain areas sustained focus, working memory, and processing speed. But from a cognitive point of view, the findings reported in scientific publications indicate improvements in these capabilities between 10% and 30%. The level high-performance systems are implemented by experts and are developed in compliance with strict scientific criteria, which are critical to implementing the changes proposed. It is important to emphasize that the interventions include cognitive and neurophysiological assessments that allow pre- and post-training testing to detect cognitive development and improvements at brain level. These changes in brain plasticity are cognitive performance neurobiological support. High work-related requirements push our brains to function to our full capacity and use all the cognitively processed information, improving reaction times, decision-making, and focus. Training various cognitive abilities is critical for this, and there are increasingly new approaches and technologies that provide this choice, enabling its incorporation and complementarity with other methods to reinforce different aspects of each person. That has a significant impact on daily life and work, learning and retaining information more efficiently. You want to remember more of what you're reading and hearing. These 6 easy tips which are going to do just that. Science is saying so. Many people believe that success is what you care about, but success is only based on what you learn. That's why we all want to learn more efficiently, retain more information, and boost memories. So let's look at some perfect ways to do just that. And science-based. Science is continuously discovering new links between simple things that we can do every day, which will boost our overall memory. Memory is a complex mechanism consisting of many different brain tasks. Until looking at ways to enhance performance, here's a condensed version to illustrate how memory works. Stage 1. Shape a file. In a specific pattern correlated with the event, we are witnessing our brain send signals and establishes associations between our neurons, called synapses. Stage 2. Strengthen memory. Don't do something else, and the memory would quickly fade away. Consolidation is the act of committing something to memory in the long term so we can recall it later. Some of this cycle occurs when we sleep as our brains replicate the same pattern of brain activity and strengthen the earlier synapses. Phase 3. Start. The recollection is nostalgic. This is what most of us think about when we talk about memory loss or memory loss. It's easier to recall a memory if it's reinforced over time, and every time we do, we go through the same pattern of brain activity to make the connection a little louder. Let's now look at some of the ways research shows that you can recall more and forget less. 1. Work out to improve memory retrieval. Both rat and human brain studies have shown that regular exercise may improve memory recall. It has even been proven that fitness in older adults slows memory decline without continued regular exercise. Research has shown that daily exercise can enhance spatial memory, but exercise may not merely be a way to boost memory retention of all types. Of course, the advantages of exercise are different, but it is shown to enhance cognitive abilities beyond memory for the brain, in particular daily exercise. So, if you're looking for a way to remain mentally healthy, the solution may be to take a stroll, chew gum to hold memories better, Another easy way to improve your memory is by chewing gum while learning something new. Contradictory evidence exists, so it is not a safe bet. But one study released last year found that participants who performed a memory recall test were more successful and had better response times when they chewed gum during the study. One reason our memory recall may be impaired by chewing gum is that it enhances activity in the hippocampus, an essential region of the brain for memory. However, it's still unclear why this happens. Another hypothesis focuses on oxygen from chewing gum and how it can boost concentration and attention, allowing us to develop more reliable brain connections while we learn new things. One research showed that people who chewed gum during memory and learning tasks had higher rates of heart rate, a factor that may allow more blood to flow through the brain. Drink coffee to help preserve memory. If taken before learning something new, it's debatable whether caffeine can improve memory. Most researchers found little to no effect from the ingestion of caffeine before new memories are created. However, one recent study found that taking a caffeine pill after a learning task did improve memory recall up to 24 hours later. Participants memorized a series of images and were then tested by showing the same images, targets, identical images, lures, and images, foils, entirely different. The goal was to pick the exact images they had memorized without being fooled by the lures, which were very similar. This is a process called pattern separation that, according to the researchers, represents a deeper level of memory retention. Researchers in this study focused on the effects of caffeine on memory consolidation, the process of reinforcing the memories we have. This is why they conclude the symptoms happened, rather than before, when caffeine was consumed during the learning exercise. But don't just drink a little coffee to get going in the morning. Drink a little coffee to keep up with more of what you're doing all day long. Meditate on improving working memory. Working memory, which is much like a notepad for your brain, is where new knowledge is temporarily stored. You hold on to that information in working memory until you're finished with them when you know someone's name or hear an address from a location you're going to. When they're no longer useful, then you'll let them go absolutely. When they are useful, you commit them to long-term memory, where they can later be strengthened and remembered. Working memory is something that we use every day, and when it is better, it makes our lives a lot easier. Although the limit we can keep in our working memory for most adults is around 7 things, it can be improved if you're not using your working memory to the fullest capacity meditation. Research has shown that in only 8 weeks, participants with no experience in mindfulness meditation will boost their memory recall. Meditation has also been shown to boost standardized test scores and job memory after just 2 weeks, with its ability to help us focus. How memory supports meditation? This is very counterintuitive. The brain avoids processing the information as effectively as it would usually be during meditation. So take a break sometimes to clear your mind. You'll not only feel a little less depressed, but you may also even remember a little bit more. Eat the berries for improved memory in the long run. Evidence suggests that eating berries will help stave off deteriorating memory. Research by the University of Reading and the Peninsula Medical School showed that 12 weeks of supplementing a healthy diet with blueberries enhanced efficiency on spatial work memory tasks. The effects began after just 3 weeks and continued for the rest of the test. A long-term berry study that tested the memory of female nurses over 70 years of age found those who regularly ate at least 2 portions of strawberries or blueberries per week had a moderate decrease in memory. The benefits of strawberries could be debatable. However, as that research was partly sponsored by the California Strawberry Commission, and another strawberry research indicated that you would have to consume around 10 pounds of strawberries a day to see some effect. Further work in this field is needed, but scientists are getting closer to understanding how our brains could be influenced by berries. Blueberries, in particular, are known to be high in flavonoids, which tend to strengthen existing connections in the brain. On long-term memory, that could explain their benefit. And even though it turns out they don't do anything to support your brain, berries are still very good for you. Rest more of memory consolidation. Sleep has been known to be one of the essential aspects of a good memory. Since sleep is when much of our memory consolidation cycle happens, it makes sense that we would struggle to recall things we've learned without enough sleep. Only a quick sleep will make your memory recall easier. Participants in one study memorized illustrated cards to measure their power of memory. They have taken a 40-minute break after memorizing a series of cards, and one group napped while the other group remained awake. Following the break, both groups were checked on their card memory. The sleep group performed substantially better to the delight of the researchers, maintaining, on average, 85% of patterns compared to 60% for those who stayed awake. Research suggests that it is still fragile and quickly lost when memory is first established in the brain, specifically in the hippocampus. Particularly if the brain is asked to memorize more information, napping tends to transfer memories to the neocortex, the more permanent storage of the brain that prevents them from being overwritten. Sleep is not only necessary after learning a crucial part of the memory formation cycle, but sleep is also necessary before learning anything new. Studies have found that lack of sleep will impair our ability to memorize new information and retain any new memories that we make. Knowledge retention tactics for more effective learning. The human brain is wired into oblivion. Within the immediate moment or circumstance, not all information is needed. It is up to instructional designers and facilitators of training to help the learners optimize the retention of information. And memory is the process of encoding, inputting, storing, organizing, and retrieving, accessing information, and tactics can be used to improve these functions in the deliverables. Our brains work by cells and connections to other cells. When we have a new idea, such as pink elephants wearing tutors, a neuron for that idea develops and creates connections within the brain to other similar neurons. They're activated as the neurons bind, and electricity zooms through the neuron and reinforces it. But if no additional electricity zooms across that neuron, the connecting dendrites will immediately start atrophying, and that neuron can disappear within 20 minutes of the first formation. We store a lot of information, so if we didn't add it to the current brain structure, a piece of information would have fewer connections. Therefore, an established method of teaching abstract concepts is to link it and draw on more specific or universal concepts. One strategy is to use examples or analogies. For example, it is reinforced by strengthening a brain cell, like inserting strands into a rope where each strand densifies the whole and adds strength to the final product. If we didn't add it to the current brain structure, a piece of knowledge would have fewer connections. Below are some approaches that can be used by learning practitioners to help improve learning performance, including some concrete examples for instructor-led training, ILTE, virtual ILT, and learning. Involve good learners. Get learners to engage actively through group conversation. Practice or teach or communicate with colleagues. IILT. Make the learners create their what's in it for me. BWIIFM as a community, and teams are developing plans or tools to bring back to work. BLT. Use team breakout sessions to build a presentation about a subject. E-learning. Build exercises in which learners practice the same skills they would use at work. Stimulate multiple senses. Where necessary, add images or visuals to the audio, an element such as taste, touch, or smell. Adapt the learning environment to the job environment. or enable the learners to envision the challenge effectively. A common technique among athletes that are entering the business world. IILT. When learners work in teams, they play music which helps to give the room a sense of time or energy. Do not merely display an apple picture for an analogy. Place an apple on each table. VLT. Using vibrant imagery to reinforce the message and not just words. Try mirroring the Pecha Kucha challenge. Learning, consider incorporating more multimedia, such as music, sound effects that provide input, or a guided visualization narrated. Adapt the learning environment to the job environment, or allow the learners to imagine the task effectively. Engage in emotions effectively. Each new piece of information obtained is rapidly prioritized by the brain, first for protection or survival, second for emotion, and third for sense. Emotional messages last much longer than messages, which are pure facts. IILT, using provocative pictures. Training guru Sivasalam Thiagarajan, for example, leads an exercise in which he identifies 3 patients in need of treatment, 2 aged people and 1 who is vulnerable and needs intensive care, and asks participants what they should first care for. The third person is seldom used unless the patient is revealed to be a boy. BLET training consultant Archon asks participants to analyze a set of logos, either for the number of colors or the emotions they're associating with the organization. People who test for emotion have higher retention rates. E-learning, embed testimonials or other videos involving the learner and evoking an emotional response. Emotional messages last much longer than messages, which are pure facts. Using novelty. Naturally, people pay attention to stuff that scares them. A single image creates a lasting impression. A major attention grabber is when the presenter plays with a simulated imager. For example, by using animation to create the impression that she catches the letter C in reactive and drags it to the front of the word to form creative. BLT. Consider creating a surprise in an interaction that can help test the expectations of the learners. Thiagarajan calls such jolts of surprises e-learning, regular frame break or task break. For instance, make each screen look and act more like a web page or mobile image and provide intuitive browsing using repeat spacing and spacing. Repeated information collection increases retention to about 80%. One approach is to have a post-course discussion for learners, such as a chat with their instructor about how they plan to use new skills. IILT. Tell the learners to build questions on index cards with answers and run through some of the questions to close the day. Answer as a reply to more questions the next morning. BLT. Provide opportunities for reflection and collaboration during the course and suggest incorporating the skills learned earlier into the opportunities. E-learning. To activate recall using follow-up questions or activities. These post-course learning enhancements are exceptionally useful in enhancing retention. Repeated information collection increases retention to about 80%. Develop an environment for brain-friendly learning. Several strategies for creating healthy neurotransmitters through modalities include exposure to nature, humor, and valuable experiences with society. Simplify content and streamline it. Design learning around core messages divided into logical flows. Show how one blow applies to the next, allowing learners to create links so they can quickly remember. Design learning around core messages divided into logical flows. Enable strong imaging use. Visual data is processed by 83% of our brains. Diagrams allow us to look at data relationships. Increased retention is the product of assisting the encoding, storage, and retrieval functions of human memory. We can help their brains remember by changing the methods in which and the atmosphere in which we deliver information. Spacing out recall tasks over the days after learning is essential because sleep is where we coordinate learning and improve it. Before you go to sleep tonight, think about it and see what you can remember tomorrow. We can help their brains remember by changing the methods in which and the atmosphere in which we deliver information. How does your brain impact decision-making? Decisions cover a wide array of complexities. There are straightforward ones. Do I want an apple with my lunch or a piece of cake? Then there are more complicated ones. Which car should I buy? Or which profession should I pick? Neuroscientists such as me have described some of the different parts of the brain that help make decisions like this. Sounds, sights, or specific previous information are processed in various locations. Yet understanding how these individual players work together as a team remains a challenge for the entire field of neuroscience, not just in understanding decision-making. Part of the explanation is that, until now, neuroscience has worked in a conventional form of science research. Individual laboratories function alone, typically concentrating on one or a few areas of the brain. This makes understanding data obtained by another lab difficult for every researcher, as we all have subtle variations in how we perform experiments. For example, neuroscientists who research decision-making set up all kinds of different games for animals to play, and we collect data on what happens in the brain when the animal makes a move. When everyone has a different experimental setup and technique, we cannot decide whether the findings from another laboratory are a guide to something unusual that is happening in the brain, or just a byproduct of variations in equipment. The BRAIN program, initiated by the Obama administration in 2013, started promoting the kind of cooperation that neuroscience requires. I just don't think he's gone far enough. So I co-founded a project called the International Brain Laboratory, a virtual mega-laboratory composed of several laboratories at different institutions, to demonstrate that the proverb "only we go fast, together we go far" is valid for neuroscience. The first issue that the partnership answers focuses on brain decision-making. The brain's decision team specific research labs have also learned plenty about how different regions of the brain relate to decision-making. Say you want to go with lunch with an apple or a slice of cake. Firstly, you need to know the two choices are apples and cookies. This needs intervention from brain regions. This handles sensory input. Your eyes see the bright red skin of the apple, while your nose takes in the cake's delicious scent. These sensory areas also interact with what we call areas of the association. Traditionally, researchers have assumed that they play a part in bringing together various pieces of knowledge by collecting information from the eyes, the ears, and so on. The association areas can provide a more coherent overview of what is going on in the world. So why choose one move over a different one? That's a problem for the compensation circuitry of the brain, which is crucial in weighing the importance of different choices. You know, the cake is going to taste sweetly pleasant now, but you can regret that later when you go to the gym. Then there is the frontal cortex, expected to play a part in regulating voluntary action. Evidence shows that once enough incoming information has arrived, it is involved in committing to a specific action. This is the part of the brain that might tell you the slice of cake tastes so amazing that all the calories are worth this. Knowing how these various areas of the brain usually work together to make decisions may help to understand what happens in diseased brains. Patients with disorders such as autism, schizophrenia, and Parkinson's disease often unusually use sensory input, mainly when it is ambiguous and uncertain. Decision-making work may also guide the care of patients with certain conditions, such as substance abuse and addiction. Indeed, addiction can be a prime example of how taking choices can go wrong. how to help take control of your brain and make better decisions. How does it make us decide? It seems like a simple problem at one level. We think about our choices, pick the one we like best, and act on it. And if we dig a little deeper, the problem becomes harder to answer. Which are our options? How do we settle? Which makes us choose one choice over another? According to mounting evidence, some decisions could be partly unconscious. It is because our minds are designed to run on autopilot from moment to moment. Much of the information picked up by our senses is instantly processed. Only a portion of that information makes it into our consciousness. This makes our brains effective, as it means that we do not need to pay attention to everything at once. Although it does have the side effect, we will make decisions based on knowledge we are not entirely aware of. Fully automated advertisement is a clear example. And if you don't pay attention to the fast food billboard next to you at the bus stop, it may still be processed by your brain beyond your consciousness. Later, when you decide to buy take-away food instead of cooking dinner, you do not have any idea that your decision was inspired by the advertisement you saw half an hour before. In a previous study, we explored this trend at the University of Melbourne. In particular, we investigated what kind of information our brains are naturally processing from the world around us. To do so, we showed participants in the periphery of their vision a series of images while performing an unrelated task in the foreground. The photos were fun images of ordinary things like food and social scenes, or symbols of wealth like money and cars. During the meantime, we have registered the electrical activity of the brains of participants using a technique called electroencephalography, EEG. After the assignment was completed by the participants, we again showed the images. We have asked some questions about them this time. In particular, we asked participants to focus on the images and tell us A, how interesting they felt the images were, and B, whether the images made them think more about the present or the future. We then applied a statistical decoding technique to the EEG brain activity reported when people first saw the images, and found that from brain activity we could predict judgments of both excitation and time comparisons. Importantly, when they first saw the videos, the participants didn't realize they would have to make such decisions. This means that knowledge regarding excitation and time reference would have been processed automatically by the brain. What this tells us is that the brains of the participants conducted a quick semantic image analysis, although the images were not crucial to the task at hand. What's more, the brains of the participants were collecting highly abstract knowledge, such as whether a picture was more relevant to the present or the future. Our findings, taken in context, indicate that common sense theories about how we make choices underestimate the significance of information beyond consciousness. Cure the World, our laboratory has shown previously that when a satisfying prime is first seen, such as the Apple logo, people are more impulsive in fundamental financial decisions. It is so, even though the prime only exists for a very brief period and cannot be identified, that demonstrates a surprising strength of being processed beyond conscious knowledge. The automatic processing of the world around us by our brain, even though we believe we are in complete control of our acts, can tip the playing field by showing that our brains make abstract decisions about images automatically. Our research indicates a potential mechanism by which this priming decision might work. The mechanism may influence even very complex decisions more than we know. So far, we have spoken of simple decisions, but in theory, even decisions with significant consequences, such as buying a house or changing jobs, may be affected. This viewpoint can seem confusing because it appears to strip us of our sense of control over our decisions. This isn't necessarily accurate, though that kind of knowledge our brain processes cannot be managed by our surroundings, but we can regulate what kinds of situations we put ourselves in. For example, this explains why it's a bad idea for someone trying to stop smoking to surround themselves with people who smoke, and why it would be safer for someone with a gambling problem not to watch TAV poker. Similarly, the more impulsive and reckless you become, the more necessary it might be to surround yourself with people and situations that inspire you to think about the future. Our brains may be automatic engines for processing, but we can monitor what kind of fuel those engines are receiving. How to manage distractions and keep your mind from wandering and aging your time isn't going to do you any good if you can't handle where your mind wanders. So there's so much noise blinking in our faces these days that if we don't take an aggressive approach to stop it, we might as well kiss our productivity goodbye. The challenge is that there's not only too much information, but we do also have the technology that drives this information into our lives, whether we want to or not, she says. No one walks into an Apple shop, plops $200 down and says, "There's money here so people can bother me at any moment." Attention is more precious than the currency. You have to get their attention first before you can grab anybody's company. And this is basically what ends up happening for all of us. For that reason, Thomas claims our attention has become our most coveted asset. The focus is more worthwhile than money, she says. Before you can win the business of anyone, you've got to get their attention first. So before you can do something about your day, you've got to brace yourself against something that might be angling to hijack your attention. But where to start? Fast Company talked to Thomas about the difference between time management and attention management and how to take better control of your wandering mind in a world of overloading information. Time management is not enough. Time management primarily requires the preparation and prioritization of calendar tasks or events. We can plan our lives to the very second, but a plan does not do us a lot of good if we don't prevent distractions from coming in. Managing the time and the focus is not the same thing. Managing time is a dated concept. Caution is at the heart of it all. In the era of constant interruption, writing stuff can't cope with the millions of distractions on your calendar, says Thomas. If you've allocated 30 minutes in your schedule to do something and then spend the time running back and forth between email, text messages and people coming to your office, you're going to have a lot of different experience than if you've handled your attention as well. Everybody wants time of the grid if your job demands more from you than being in constant contact with people you're dealing with. And that's the majority of it, although you might not be able to isolate for the whole day, as less than 20 to 30 minutes of real time will carry you well beyond 2 hours spent on the same job, filled with frequent interruptions. If that sounds unlikely, then just think about it from the viewpoint of a hiring manager. When you interview people, you're not asking them, "How many G-chats can you juggle at one time?" Thomas says. You recruit them for their expertise and knowledge. The bottom line: don't let endless interruptions and requests knock those skills and knowledge aside. Focus on your job priorities instead of your mission priorities. One right way to start is to avoid the temptation to make the first thing you tackle every day by email. Instead of sitting at your desk and reflexively opening your inbox, take the time to get clear about what you need to accomplish that day and start with the most important thing on the list. Most people have no agenda for their day, Thomas says. We get into work and only do everything that happens. What's in their text decides their day. Reacting is much quicker and more straightforward than trying to find out what you're going to do. When you don't see your career priorities clear, spend time getting focused on them. Thomas calls those role priorities as opposed to mission priorities. Role priorities are the whole reason you've been recruited or taken up a position first. In your line of work, they're what makes you most successful and professional. Spend time figuring out these 2 or 3 most important aspects of your work, Thomas advises. and keep it to the way you spend your day, she says. How much of this correspondence about your work is linked to these top 3 most important things? Streamline where you keep track of goals. Ask yourself, how many different places do you keep track of different tasks that you need to do? Oh, doodles are always spread around various parts of our lives. In a calendar, in an email, in a task manager, scribbled on a notebook page, or in a sticky note. But the effect, Thomas says, is that people are always frustrated by the sheer number of places that they need to search to find out what needs to be done. With your goals spread around various places, it's always easier to behave impulsively and respond to incoming emails instead of looking at the big picture and determining how to allocate your energy better. Reacting is much faster and simpler than trying to find out what you should be doing, Thomas says. When you have 6 seats to check, people say, I'm just going to check my email because it's right there. Figuring out a way to manage your workflow so that everything you need to do is contained in one place will make it easier to avoid being reactive to what's streaming in your inbox. There is an increasing number of resources to choose from when it comes to managing the workflow, including David Allen's Getting Things Done, Michael Linenberger's Total Workday Control, Franklin Covey's 5 Choices to Productivity, and Thomas' program called Empowering Productivity. There's a similar goal at the root of all of them, managing all you need to get done in one place. Look out for the skim and skip email trap. Sometimes we don't respond to emails as often as skimming them and choosing to answer later. Thomas calls the technique skim and skip. One major mistake people make is that they think, I'm going to get to it later, but never come later, she says. We end up piling up all of this stuff in our inboxes. So when it comes to efficiently interact at work, dropping the ball on a correspondence is never a definite form. Most people receive an average of 100 work emails a day, and responding to each message takes about 2 minutes on average, Thomas says. Instead of taking 2 minutes to respond to incoming messages every 5 minutes, set aside chunks of time to take care of email en masse. It's important to spend time reading, storing and handling your email messages, Thomas says. It's spent the majority of the time doing stuff, how to not get distracted, 10 practical tips to sharpen your focus. You're sitting down at your office, ready to do some research. All right, let's do this, you say. You scroll to Word or Excel or PowerPoint, etc., and open a new document. You have some idea what to do, but what to do next. You write down a few words, but you simply cannot stay concentrated. Instead, you think, maybe I have something nice to wake up with. You go to Twitter, 20 minutes away. Next comes YouTube. Away 60 minutes. Lunchtime is here before you know it. And half the day's gone. Does that sound familiar? Were you ever thinking your day wasted? Well, it doesn't have to be this way. All you need to do is concentrate on completing this article and find out how you can't get distracted. But before we move on to the tips, here are some crucial things you need to know. It's hard to stop distractions. If it comes to distractions, you're not alone if you need to work for hours at a time. It's not easy to remain on track, but certain people can do it. The problem is this: why they and not you? You never got taught how to concentrate. It's funny how we've never been told how to learn and be centered all along our school days, even though that's all we've done. This was only believed, and basically whether or not you ended up learning how to do such stuff at all was hit or miss. The resources to help you improve your focusing capacity, because everybody is left to their own devices, it's up to you to find ways to learn the ability to concentrate. That's what these tips are about, so you can keep focused on what we want to do for ourselves and on the road. So let's get started with no more ado. First of all, keep your dream and ambitions in mind. Why do you even need to focus? Need to become an expert guitar player? Like to write a novel? Want to get started working from home? Just think about it. Knowing why we need to remain focused can help us push through the tough and tedious parts of achieving our objectives. That's when our focusing ability is tested, and when it's needed most. Reduce the chaos of your day by concentrating on 2 to 3 important tasks. When you have 20 tasks, how successful do you think your concentrating skill will be every day? Terrible, huh? When you're too busy to concentrate. You can't hope to do those stuff with sophistication. You have to break it down to the basics. Focus on doing only 2-3 crucial tasks a day. Even one is all right, but nothing more. It's all that you need to take action to reach your goals. Slower is much better than giving up early because you've taken on too much. Too fast. Do these tasks as soon as possible to ensure that you complete those 2 to 3 tasks, and you need to do them early. This means you are already plotting how to do them as soon as you wake up. So get up, use the toilet, eat breakfast, and do it. Yes! The best time to do it is before work. It's hard, but waiting for them only encourages temptation to take over. Those distractions will arrive, wasting your willpower. It makes it difficult to focus on your goals. So don't wait to work on your goals. Do it as soon as possible. Concentrate on just the smallest part of your job at a time, and simple way to get rid of your concentration is to see a target for the tremendous giant achievement it is. Some goals will take at least a few weeks to months to accomplish, and realizing it will make you feel like it's going to take forever to do it. It can lead you to do one of two things. You get frustrated because the goal is too high, or you fantasize about what the goal is going to be like. Either way is wrong for your concentration, and therefore a possible issue when you concentrate on the big picture or when you use visualization. And what is it you should be doing? Instead, concentrate on doing a meager, minimal amount of work. For example, which seems more comfortable? Write 200 words a day, or write at least 2 sentences a day. Push-ups a day, or at least 1 push-up a day. The secret to using minimums here is, chances are you're going to drive them past. Your minimum will gradually rise, and you'll slowly develop your ability to remain focused on the larger tasks. Visualize yourself working. I stated briefly in Tip 4 that visualization strategies can do more harm than often benefit you. But there is a proper way to use visualization, and it's by simply visualizing yourself functioning, not as if you've already succeeded. This technique is used to great success by champion athletes, usually by working backward. At first, they visualize themselves winning, then they conduct the entire cycle in reverse, feeling and visualizing each move to the start. More straightforward and more meaningful way of doing this would be to believe you are doing a small part of the job. For example, if you need to practice your guitar, but it's across the room because of this scenario, let's assume maximum laziness. What do? Next, imagine standing up. Actually, think about the sensation of getting up and then doing it. When you honestly thought that visualized and felt the act of standing up, then it would be easy to act on that feeling. So repeat the process of visualization with each move until you have the guitar in your pocket and you play it. The cycle of concentrating so intently on each step distracts you from how badly you don't want to do it. And ready your body. Visualizations for each step you need to do. All you have to do is apply this method to anything you need to concentrate on. Just begin with the smallest movement you need to make. Monitor the internal distractions. One of those issues you can't get away from is the internal distractions. You need to find ways to prepare your mind for work, and also find natural ways of preventing it from straying into non-essential thoughts. Using a dedicated workstation is an excellent way to prepare the mind for the work. If you are always working in a particular area, then your mind will associate that area with work-related thinking. Just pretty simple. Right. Make sure you leave your workstation when you take breaks. That way you'll know when you're also safe. To let your thoughts roam free. Deadlines are also useful here. Use, for example, the Pomodoro form. See tip is 9. This strategy helps prevent your mind from wandering around while you are moving up with the looming deadline. Ultimately, though, it is all about getting some momentum moving to quiet those unwelcome thoughts. So rather than focusing on what is going on internally, focus on getting something done. Anything! When you do that, you can see that all your thoughts are about completing your mission. Delete external distractions. This tip is easy. Just get away from distracting stuff. Is television a thing of the past? Work out in a separate room. Do children annoy you? Get up early and work before you wake up. Was it noisy internet? Switch modem off. What you should do usually is clear, but you should not ignore this piece of advice anyway. Skip what you don't know. This is a trick that I don't see often enough when you hit a snag in your work and then come back to it. Center your attention on what you should do and at all costs continue to work mindlessly. All of this means you can first concentrate on the dull bits. You will finally come back to the more challenging pieces, and perhaps by then it will have come to you, or you'll have built up enough momentum that if you concentrate on it, it won't disrupt your concentration. Improve your discipline with focus practice. You can do a couple of focus exercises to improve your overall discipline. The first is meditation, which is, in reality, merely determining concentration. Think about it. Obviously, you're just sitting there doing nothing. It's a perfect way to develop concentration, de-stress, and give you more control over your emotions. You should give the meditation a shot. The second exercise forms Pomodoro. These are essentially personal sprints, followed by a substantial break in each one. Like real sprints, over time, you can get better and better at doing them. Increasing interval enhances the ability to remain concentrated when it matters. So trying this out is more than worth the time. And aid your momentum. Momentum is like a lubricant for the discipline. It helps to ease the goal, sticking process. That's why I think we must never take any real breaks from our goals. We end up losing momentum and depending on consistency to get back on track. Not an easy thing to do. That means we need to do something positive every day to achieve our goals. Yes, including weekends and holidays. And I don't mean a big task when I say important, but any task that takes us closer to our goals. If your ambition is to be a freelance writer, for example, then write a single pitch on the weekend. If your goal is to get safe, then go even on Christmas Day for a quick 5-minute walk. Nothing big, nothing insane, just things that are important enough to contribute to your overall goal's success. Minimizing distractions, ways to take control of your day. So, what did you do over the weekend? The water cooler discussion begins. After a busy day, it may feel like some welcome relief from your heavy workload. However, time flies, and 15 minutes later, you know you're late for a meeting with the boss, and the pain comes back. At times, it seems as if our workplaces were built to break our concentration. And if you're snowed under with work, you'll still always check your emails daily, read Twitter feedback from clients, or even though your boss disapproves, surf the internet for cheap holiday flights. The Overload Research Group, a group of academic and corporate researchers committed to minimizing the amount of information people have to deal with, has found that OS employees spend about 25% of their time coping with an incessant stream of data, losing a whopping $997 billion a year to their employers. They will recognize the 10 most common distractions they encounter in the workplace and analyze tactics to handle or even remove them altogether. Our smartphones, and now smartwatches, blurred the distinction between personal and professional contact. We can now receive work emails and phone calls on the same platform as private comments from Facebook, Instagram images, and an array of other personal details. Given the addictive nature of such technologies, measures to regulate their use at work are rarely successful because it is difficult to impose restrictions on what people can look at on their own devices. Once people grasp and handle the task themselves, it's usually more effective. For example, you and your colleagues may decide to put away your phones during the day for some time to help you concentrate on a specific piece of work. Most of the emails are not especially relevant in our inboxes, but as soon as they arrive, we still feel the need to look at them. So here are 5 ways to handle those texts so they don't push you off essential tasks. Schedule checking time. Turn off the alarm that appears when you receive an email on your computer screen and review and respond to messages at the scheduled time of day. Give yourself up to 30 minutes per session at most. Manage the perceptions of your staff, supervisors, and customers on how and when you will react to them. Choose poor productivity periods when you do your best work. Maybe in the morning or maybe late at night. There are undoubtedly other periods of the day. Schedule your most efficient periods for an email check-in and save your peak hours for high-value jobs. Turn emails into actions. If you plan to read or answer an email for longer than a few minutes, add it to your action plan or to do-do list. Using the garbage. Do not just hold addresses. When you do, you run the risk of losing sight of the important ones as your inbox expands and becomes harder and harder to handle your inbox. Once you've replied, I'd place those you don't need in the trash and archive or file those you want to keep. Mobile syncing. Try to switch your email to your mobile to help you free up distractions from your device. Then add the above advice to your personal computer. Tip. Take a look at our posts, 10 popular email mistakes and overcoming information overload, and listen to Mike's song on email management for more information about this sort of diversion. Social media provides us with new ways to interact with unprecedented numbers of people. It can also be a killer of efficiency, dragging our attention away from the job tasks and weakening our concentration. Organizations can no longer only restrict people's exposure to non-work-related websites. Smartphones can get around that as they run on broadband networks independent of any work-based internet exposure. People must also be motivated to use social media wisely so as not to impact their efficiency and concentration. Research by Florida International University's Miriam Hurl and Vivian Astray, Canada, suggests that companies apply Adams' equity theory to clarify to team leaders the negative effect of inappropriate social media usage on production. Seek to monitor your social networking usage over a week to see how much time you spend during working hours on these platforms. Instead, arrange notifications or replying messages for a few moments per day. Instant messaging. Many workplaces use an in-platform to establish communication between team members, but thanks to non-essential alerts and emojis, it can also be a source of annoyance. Get into the habit of using it only for short, rapid requests, not for conversations. Resist the urge to respond immediately and consider setting different times during the online day of your status. 5. Browsing, reading the latest news, checking sports scores, and buying new clothes online, even for the office, can easily steal 30 minutes of our time, as well as being frequently a violation of the rules of the workplace. Turning off internet connectivity is not usually a choice because companies are increasingly using cloud-based software that needs an internet connection to be fully operational. But you can install blocking apps, such as Freedom, to help you determine which websites or links you want to block. If this is appropriate within your company, using a brief personal browsing session as a reward of high quality, concentrated work for an hour or two. This technique can be supported by the Pomodoro technique, Telephone calls, a phone's ring, always triggers an urgent desire to respond, even though we're in deep concentration. Consider arranging a rota to minimize this source of distraction for you and your team, so that team members can make calls to each other. They can use it to test whether people can handle the call. If you don't want to turn off your phone due to family issues, pre-program some fast text answers, such as in a meeting, will return your call ASAP. You can also clarify to friends and family that you'll only be available for lunchtime or evening calls. Work atmosphere rather than trying to avoid distractions such as strong smells of cooking or noisy colleagues. Get away from the problem. Set up in an empty conference room to get your mind back on top. Wear headphones that block noise or play white noise to blot out anything that might otherwise attract your eye. Tip E. Some people get distracted much more quickly than others. To find out more, check out our posts on handling susceptible individuals and handling a person with ADHD. Confusion also seeks to make a to-do list manageable. Getting one that's too long will contribute to procrastination when you're wondering the next task to tackle. Commit yourself today to complete the 2 most essential things on your list and place the rest on hold until tomorrow. If you find that you still deal with urgent yet unplanned inquiries, seek to examine these problems more thoroughly and use problem-solving strategies to discover their underlying cause. Addressing this will help reduce or even remove the disturbance altogether. Now, you're part of a team, so ask your colleagues to spread the burden over busy periods. If you are a boss, learn how to delegate efficiently. Tip: one who causes himself to get distracted too quickly could be handled. Encourage him to recognize and resolve this behavior's root causes and develop healthier behaviors. Other people, if you're part of a virtual team, colleagues who visit your office may be a significant diversion source, but you're also a manager who needs to be open to members of your team. And if at times when you need to concentrate on a job you don't want to be interrupted, consider working at home or in a meeting room as a way to avoid unintentionally inviting interruptions. Open the door if you have your room, and inform your colleagues you need to be left alone to reflect for a moment. Consider the workplace less hospitable by eliminating additional chairs in an open design office, or get up when a colleague arrives. Speak to her about the issue if you have a regular disruptor, because she does not even know that she distracts you. Tip: our post, Interruptions Management, offers more support in this field. You'll need a lot of mental and physical strength to juggle your goals, handle your guests, and have the discipline to monitor your technology use. So you must be taking care of yourself. Because of the pressures of technology at home, many people don't get enough sleep, so use best practice there too. Dehydration will make you feel exhausted and have an effect on your mind, so try drinking plenty of water, get some fresh air during the day, and take a short walk. Both can energize you. Seek to avoid heavy lunches and snacks filled with sugar, because they can contribute to a concentration drop later in the day. Tip: evidence shows that by understanding that specific disruptions are inevitable and planning for them, you can boost your efficiency and overall time management. Key points every single day. We face distractions. They are raising our productivity and heighten our tension. Consider what would most disturb you during your working day, and technology would probably be high on the list. Start putting on new activities to help you handle your distractors. Evaluate the use of phone, texting and email carefully, and restrict the time you spend on social media. Make it clear when you don't want to be interrupted to people, or get away from noisy situations to find a quiet place to work. Hold your 2 do-do lists handy and concise. Implementing these steps will mean that more is done for you and your team members. Stress management: how to reduce prevent and cope with stress. It could sound like you can do nothing about your stress level. The bills won't stop coming. There will never be more hours in the day for all your errands, and there will always be overwhelming obligations for your job or family. But you have far more power than you'd expect. The pure knowledge that you are in control of your life is, in fact, the basis for stress management. Managing stress is all about taking responsibility for your feelings, your emotions, your schedule, your atmosphere, and how you cope with problems. The ultimate goal is a healthy life with time for work, relationships, relaxation, and fun, plus the ability to hold up under pressure and face head-on challenges. Identify the stress sources in your life. Stress management starts with recognizing the stress sources in your life. That's not as easy as it sounds. Your exact causes of stress are not always clear, and ignoring your stress-inducing thoughts, emotions, and actions are all too easy. Yeah, you might know you're always worried about the deadlines for work, but maybe it's the procrastination that contributes to deadline tension rather than the actual work demands. Look closely at your routines, behaviors, and excuses to find the real causes of stress. Will you justify away stress as temporary? I'm just getting a million things going on right now. Even if you can't recall the last time you took a breather, define stress as an essential part of your job or life at home. Things are always wild around here, or as part of your personality. I have a lot of nervous energy, that's all. Will you blame other people or outside events for your tension, or do you perceive it as totally natural and unusual? Your stress level will remain beyond your influence until you take responsibility for the role you play in generating or sustaining it. Start a stress journal can help you identify the regular stressors and how you deal with them in your life. Keep track of this in your journal every time you feel overwhelmed. You'll start looking at trends and popular themes as you keep a regular log. Write down what triggered the tension. If you are unsure, make a guess. If you feel mental as well as emotionally, what, you responded to it? What you've done and you feel better. Look at how you are now dealing with stress. Think about how you handle stress in your life at the moment and how you deal with it. Your journal of stress will help you recognize these. Are your approaches to coping safe or harmful, helpful or unproductive? Unfortunately, many people are dealing with stress in ways that exacerbate the problem. Unhealthy ways to cope with stress. Such coping mechanisms can temporarily alleviate stress, but in the long run, they do more damage. Smoking, drinking too much, overeating or undereating, zoning out for hours in front of the TV, or computer withdrawal from friends, family and activities, using pills or medications to relax, too much sleep, procrastinating, filling up every my. There are many safe ways to deal with stress, but they all need adjustment. You can change the situation or change your answer. It's helpful to think of the four as when determining which choice to choose: stop, change, adapt, or embrace. Since everyone has a different response to stress, there is no solution, one size fits all, to manage it. No particular strategy works in every situation or for everybody, so play with various methods and tactics. Concentrate on what's keeping you calm and in control. Dealing with stress. Full situations. Change the condition of the 4A. Stop the stressor. Changing the stressor, changing your response. Adjust to the stressor. The stressor is acknowledged. Stress management plan, Ocone. Reduce excessive stress. Not all stress can be avoided, so avoiding a problem that needs to be resolved is not safe. Nonetheless, you might be shocked by the number of stressors you can remove in your life. Learn how to say no, and stick to your boundaries, either in your personal or professional life. Refuse to assume additional obligations when you are close to meeting those obligations. Holding on more than you can handle is a formula for depression, which is surefire. Stop people who stress you out. When someone in your life is continually causing tension and you can't turn the relationship around, reduce the amount of time you spend with that person or entirely end the relationship. Take charge of your surroundings. When you're depressed by the evening news, turn off the TV. If you are tensed with traffic, take a longer but less travelled route. If it's an uncomfortable hassle to go to the store, do your grocery shopping online. Avoid hot-button subjects. Mark them off your discussion list if you're concerned about religion or politics. If you disagree with the same people over and over again on the same subject, stop bringing it up or excuse yourself when it's the topic of discussion. Prepare your to-do list, evaluate your schedule, obligations and day-to-day work. If you have too much on your plate, differentiate between the shoulds and the musts. Drop things that are not important at the bottom of the list, or entirely remove them. Stress reduction technique 2. Change situation. If a stressful situation cannot be prevented, try to modify it. Figure what you can do to change things so that the problem doesn't come up in the future. This often involves changing how you communicate and how you operate in your everyday life. Express your feelings rather than bottle them up. If you are disturbed by something or someone, express your thoughts freely and with respect. If you don't share your emotions, frustration builds up and the situation is likely to stay the same. I need to negotiate. When you expect others to change their behaviour, be prepared to do the same. When you're both able to bend at least a bit, there's a fair chance you'll reach a comfortable middle ground. Be assertive. Should not take your life back seat. Tackle things head on. Do your best to predict and avoid them. If you have an exam to study for and your chatty roommate just got home, tell them right up front that you have only 5 minutes to talk. You better handle your time. Bad time management can cause considerable stress. It is hard to keep calm and concentrated when you're spread too thin and running behind. But if you plan to make sure you don't overexpand, you can change how much stress you're under. Stress management strategy 3. Adjust to stressor when stressor cannot be changed. Adjust yourself. You can respond to difficult circumstances by adjusting your perceptions and attitude and recover your sense of control. Problems with reframe. Seek to take a more optimistic view of the difficult circumstances. Instead of fuming about a traffic jam, look at it as an excuse to pause and reassemble. Listen to your favourite radio station or spend some time alone. Look at the image big. Put the unpleasant situation into perspective. Over the long run, ask yourself how important it would be. Will that matter in a month? 1 year? Is it worth getting angry over? If the answer is no, then concentrate your energies and resources elsewhere. Place the expectations. The perfectionism is a significant cause of tension that can be avoided. Avoid committing yourself to failure by calling for perfection. Set fair expectations for yourself and others, and good enough. To be successful, focus on the positive. Take a moment to focus on all the things you enjoy in your life when stress is getting you down, including your good attributes and talents. This basic technique will help you keep a perspective on issues. Adjusting your mentality, how you perceive your mental and physical health, can have a profound impact. Anytime you think about yourself as a negative thought, your body responds as though it were in the throes of a situation full of stress. You're more likely to feel good when you see positive stuff about yourself. The opposite is exact, too. Eliminate terms like always, never, can, and must. These are telltale hallmarks of self-defeating thought. Strategy for stress reduction 4. Consider the factors you can't change. Many causes of stress are inevitable. You can't avoid or alter stressors like a loved one's death, a medical disease, or a national recession. For these situations, accepting things as they are is the best way to deal with tension. Acceptance can be strict but it's better in the long run than protesting against a situation you can't alter. Seek not to govern that which is uncontrollable. Some things in life are beyond our control, especially other people's behaviours. Reflect on issues you can influence, such as how you want to respond to problems, rather than stressing them. Look upside down. As the saying goes, what doesn't destroy us makes us stronger. Try to look at these as opportunities for personal development when faced with significant challenges. If your own poor choices have contributed to a stressful situation, think about them and learn from your errors. Share your thoughts. Speak to a trusted friend or arrange a rendezvous with a therapist. It can be very cathartic to describe what you're going through, even though there is nothing you can do to change the unpleasant situation. Try to learn to forgive. Understand that we are living in an imperfect world and people are making mistakes. Let go of the resentments and the rage. By forgiving and moving on, free yourself from the negative energy. Tension Management Plan 5. Make time for fun and relaxation. You can alleviate stress in your life by respecting yourself beyond a take-up approach and a positive mindset. When you consistently make time for fun and relaxation, when they arrive naturally, you'll be in a better position to manage the stresses of life. Healthy ways to relax and refill: go on a walk. Spend time in the wild. Call a relative, using healthy exercise to sweat out the stress. Write it in your diary. Take a long dip. Light scented candles delight with a warm cup of coffee or tea. Play with your cat. Work in the garden. Have a massage. Curl up on a good book. Head to the music. See a sitcom. Don't get so wrapped up in the life's hustle and bustle that you fail to look after your own needs. Nursing is a necessity, not a privilege. Set aside time to relax. Include in your everyday routine rest and relaxation. Don't make encroachment on other obligations. Take a break from all duties and refresh your battery. Connect with men. Spend time with those optimistic people who make your life easier. A sound support system will protect you from the detrimental stress effects. Do something that you love every single day. If it's stargazing, playing the piano or working on your bike, make time for outdoor activities that please you. Maintain your sense of humour. This requires the desire to self-laugh. The laughing act helps the body fight tension in a variety of ways. Learn the answer to relaxation. You can regulate your stress levels with relaxation strategies that activate the body's response to relaxation, a state of restfulness that is the opposite of the response to stress. Practicing these strategies daily will develop your physical and emotional strength, heal your body, and improve your overall sense of joy and serenity. Stress reduction technique 6. Adopt a healthier lifestyle by improving your physical fitness. You can improve your resilience to stress. Work out regularly. Physical exercise plays a vital role in reducing adverse effects and avoiding them. Make a workout time of at least 30 minutes, 3 days a week. None of this beats aerobic exercise to release pent-up stress and stress. Have healthy food. Well, nourished bodies are best suited to dealing with stress, so be careful of what you eat. Begin the right day with breakfast, and keep your energy and mind clear throughout the day with healthy, nutritious meals. Reduce sugar and caffeine. Temporary highs of caffeine and sugar frequently contribute to a mood and energy crash. Through your diet's amount of coffee, soft drinks, candy, and sugar snacks, you'll feel more comfortable and sleep easier. Stop drugs, cigarettes, and alcohol. Alcohol or drug self-medication may provide a quick way out of stress, but the relief is only temporary. Do not ignore the problem at hand or disguise it. Deal with issues head-on and with a clear mind. Get plenty of sleep. Adequate sleep is fueling the mind and body. Feeling exhausted can raise your tension, and it can trigger irrational thoughts. Dealing with stress: stop tobacco, caffeine, and nicotine. Stop your nicotine intake and any beverages that contain caffeine and alcohol, or at least that. Caffeine and nicotine are stimulants, and the stress level should increase rather than decrease. When consumed in large doses, alcohol is a depressant, but in smaller amounts acts as a stimulant. Use alcohol as a way of alleviating tension is also not, in the end, productive. Swap caffeinated and alcoholic drinks for coffee, herbal teas, or diluted natural fruit juices, and try to keep yourself hydrated, as this will help your body to cope with stress better. You should also aim at eliminating or reducing the consumption of refined sugars. It is found in many processed foods, including savory foods such as salad dressings and bread, and can cause energy crashes that can make you feel exhausted and irritable. On the whole, consider eating a healthy, balanced and nutritious diet. Indulge in physical activity. Stressful conditions raise the level of stress hormones in your body, including adrenaline and cortisol. They are the fight or flight hormones that developed hardwired into our brains and are engineered to shield us from immediate bodily harm when threatened. Stress in the modern age, however, is rarely remedied by a fight or flight reaction, so you can use physical activity as a way to metabolize the unnecessary stress hormones and return the body and mind to a more balanced, calmer state. Go for a brisk walk in the fresh air when you feel anxious and nervous. Seek to regularly integrate some physical activity into your everyday routine, either before or after work or at lunchtime. Regular physical activity will boost your sleep quality too. Get plus sleep. A lack of sleep is a significant cause of stress. Alas, tension often affects our sleep as thoughts start to whirl in our minds, preventing us from relaxing enough to fall asleep. Instead of depending on medicine, you can try to optimize your relaxation before you go to sleep. Make sure your bedroom is a peaceful oasis with no recollections of the things that trigger your stress. When you know that this leads to disrupted sleep, avoid caffeine throughout the evening, as well as consuming alcohol. Stop doing any mentally demanding work a couple of hours before going to bed so you can give your brain time to relax. Seek to take a warm bath or read a quiet, undemanding book for a couple of minutes to relax your body, tie your eyes, and help you forget about the things you're worried about. You will always strive to go to bed at about the same time every day so that your mind and body get used to a routine in bedtime. Use relaxation methods using a stress management technique. Aim to relax every day. There are many ways to relieve stress that have been tried and tested, so try a few and see what works best for you. Try self-hypnosis, for example, which is simple and can be performed anywhere, including at your office or inside your car. One fundamental strategy is to focus on a word or phrase that has the right meaning for you. Words like calm heart and peace work well. Or you might think of a self-assertive mantra like I deserve calm in my life, or give me serenity. Concentrate on the word or phrase you've chosen. If you find your mind wandering or you become aware of unwanted thoughts entering your mind, simply ignore them and return your attention to the word or phrase you chose. When you ever find yourself nervous again, immediately repeat the word or expression in silence. Do not stress if first you find it hard to relax. Relaxation is an ability that needs to be mastered and eventually can improve. Keep a stress diary. Keeping a stress diary is a crucial stress control technique for a few weeks because it can help you become more conscious of the circumstances that cause you to become anxious. Notice the date, time, and place of each stressful episode and notice what you've done, who you've been with, and how you feel physically and emotionally alike. Give a stress rating on, say, a 1-10 scale to each stressful episode and use the diary to understand what causes your stress and how successful you are in stressful situations. It will help you escape unpleasant circumstances and develop more robust strategies for dealing with them. Take control. Stress can be caused by a problem that can seem difficult to solve on the surface. Understanding how to solve your problems will make you feel more in control while reducing your stress level. One problem-solving strategy involves writing down the problem and putting forth as many solutions as possible. Decide on each of the good and bad points and choose the best solution. Write down every step you need to take as part of the solution. What to do, how to do it, when to do it, who is involved and where it will take place. And as your time, we all feel overburdened at times by our to-do list, and that is a growing cause of stress. Know that you can't do it all at once and start prioritizing and diarizing your activities. Create a list of all the items you need to do and list them in specific priority order. Remember what things you have to do individually and what other people can be assigned to do. The report which activities must be completed immediately, in the next week, in the next month, or when the time permits. 9. Learn to say no. Too much to do and too little time to do is a common cause of stress. Yet a lot of people will also choose to take on extra responsibilities in this case. Understanding to say no to new or irrelevant requests may help to reduce your stress level, which can also enable you to gain greater self-confidence. You need to understand why you find it challenging to learn to say no. Many people find it difficult to say no because they want to support and want to be helpful and to be accepted. To some, it's a fear of confrontation, rejection, or opportunities missed. Recall that all of these obstacles to saying no are self-created. You may feel reluctant, at least initially, to respond to a request with a straight no. Instead, think of some pre-prepared words to more politely let others down. Practice saying phrases like, "I'm sorry, but I can't commit to this as I currently have other priorities. It's not a good time now as I'm in the midst of something. Why are you not asking me again? Which I would love to do, but 10. Rest if you're sick, if you feel unwell. Don't feel you're going to have to carry on because of that. A brief rest spell will allow the body to recover more quickly. Tips for reducing stress through diet. Eat little and often on busy days. This will keep the metabolism going during the day and reduce energy levels, peaks and troughs. Eat breakfast, although you may not feel hungry or think you have insufficient time. Eating breakfast helps set off your day metabolism and also helps regulate your level of blood sugar, which, in effect, can reduce stress. For maximum benefits, choose the fruit or fruit juice and whole grain cereal. Eat well during the day. Make sure you consume at least 5 servings of fruit and vegetables per day, and concentrate on foods that include vitamins B and C and magnesium. B vitamins will help you feel more relaxed after a stressful episode. Bananas, leafy green vegetables, avocados, nuts, seeds, as well as meat, fish and dairy products all contain vitamins B essential. Vitamin C. The adrenal glands contain the largest store of vitamin C in the body and are essential for stress hormone production. Eat citrus fruits such as oranges, tomatoes, peppers, kiwi, leafy green vegetables, broccoli, and other vitamin C-rich foods. Magnesium can help calm your muscles and reduce your anxiety. Increase your magnesium intake by eating nuts, but also hazelnuts and peanuts, particularly Brazil nuts. Equally good sources of magnesium are leafy green vegetables, whole grains, particularly oats, brown rice and beans. You should also take a soothing bath with a good handful of Epsom salts, available at your pharmacist's, since they contain magnesium that can be absorbed through your skin. For more detailed information on the vitamins and minerals, see our pages, Vitamins and Dietary Minerals, as well as attempting to increase the consumption of those foods. You should also be mindful of other people's adverse effects and therefore seek to mitigate them. Caffeine is present mainly in coffee, tea, certain soft drinks, and chocolate. If consumed in large doses, it can have adverse effects on the body. Seek to eliminate caffeine by substituting decaffeinated forms of coffee or tea, herbal tea or green tea, which is often full of antioxidants. Replace sugar and caffeinated soft drinks with sparkling water or preferably diluted fruit juice, and hide the consumption of caffeine and sugar, since caffeine can remain in your body for 6 hours or more. After lunchtime, avoid all caffeinated drinks and you can sleep better. A significant factor in reducing stress levels is having enough sleep. Alcohol, sugar, salt and nicotine. You should be working to reduce the alcohol, sugar and salt consumption. The use of these products is all known to strip the body of vital nutrients and reverse a healthy diet. Start fuming. Although it may feel like an immediate stress reliever to reach for a cigarette, it creates more significant stress over time. By looking at our diet, increasing our consumption of stress-busting nutrients, and restricting our consumption of stress-inducing substances, we will feel better about ourselves and our well-being, as well as give our bodies the ability to cope with stressful conditions and heal from them. Conclusion. The human brain is a very complex and fascinating organ in the human body. It is so fascinating that the scientists researching the role that the brain plays in cognitive function have done enormous amounts of work. The brain has 3 fundamental units that are both responsible for the body's distinct functional role. The brain and spinal cord are the central nervous system's 2 key structures. The 3 units of the brain are the hindbrain, midbrain and forebrain. In each area of the brain, different ones have their main roles to direct cognitive functions. The brain helps us organize, retrieve and make sense out of the knowledge that we absorb every day using the various regions of our brain that function together and independently. The brain injury of Phineas Gage was extremely severe and impaired his cognitive abilities, which are being used in large quantities of brain science and how it works to this day.